All right, it's 6 o'clock. Time to call a meeting to order. And something new that we have added into our agenda to remind everyone, the mission of St. James R1 School District is to empower students through caring relationships, academic excellence, and community partnerships. The vision of St. James School District is to empower all students to positively contribute to the community and the world. With that in mind, we're holding our monthly meeting, and I would like a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll make the motion.
I have a motion? Second. Have a second. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We have an agenda. Say the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag is over this way. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In our district, we share good things that's happening within the district and the community. Anyone have any good things they'd like to share?
I do. I don't want to embarrass Tim Rattini here, but I want to
Put your mic on. Put your mic on.
Oh. I want to talk about Linda Webster for a minute. Sorry, guys. She's like feeding our whole community. I mean, our children. It's amazing. Am I correct in saying that now we have free lunches and breakfast, right, for our kids? All year. She started last March, and I am just amazed at what she's been able to do, get these grants, and you all know as well as I do that this is the only food a lot of the kids get. So I understand it goes till June of next year, is that correct? For this whole academic year. Yes, so I just want to give her kudos and say, thank you, Linda. I am in awe that you've been able to feed our children in this district, so.
Anyone else?
Carl, he talked about the mission and vision. I was going to challenge the board members that I have extra masks. It's kind of like baseball cards. You get all three. It's a complete set. So you already have the Caring Relationships mask that it was a freebie, but we also have the Academic Excellence mask and the Community Partnership mask. And if you come see me sometime and let me know if you tell me, recite the mission statement, you'll get you another mask. So that's a challenge, that's a good thing, but I would like to compliment our entire school. The teachers have really taken this on, and we just did this, and step one is to get people excited about something, and when you get excited about it, then you want to live it. And so I'm really excited about later on in the board meeting where we're going to talk about the CSIP and officially getting that approved tonight if that's what the board wishes to do. But the teachers have gone so far as we have students, even our little ones, running up to us, administrators, teachers, telling us the mission statement. And it's one thing to memorize something, but it's another thing if people believe in it and then you make it happen and live it. So we're really excited about that. I have one other thing. Just two other things? Oh, I do. One other thing, two other things. First, I got a email from a teacher from Bourbon that she was coming to pick up, and we were a hub for the FEMA masks that were sent to this South Central area. St. James is kind of a central spot for a lot of school districts in central Missouri, and so we had lots of different schools coming to St. James. And we had one individual who was sent from Bourbon, a fifth grade teacher, who called, and it was a little bit late. People were already, it was 4:35. And Shannon, she bragged on Shannon. Shannon did some she stayed late, and communicated, and we got a really, really good, I got a really good email from this teacher from Bourbon. She said this afternoon she was so helpful and pleasant when I stopped and even helped me load the boxes. We appreciate the willingness to be that we were the regional drop site, and I'm thankful this is the district where my kiddos attend school. So that was very nice. Her name is Laura Stites. She has students that go to school here, and she is a teacher at Bourbon, so she's seeing some good things going on at our school, and she really appreciated Shannon stepping up and and being so helpful, which she always is anyway. And actually, her husband happens to be here, right? It's Patrick Stites. And I have one last thing. Our very own Mr. John Brack. He satisfactorily completed the essential board member certification. 18 and a half hours training as required by state and so, congratulations. Thank you. There you go. You wear this new, right? All right. And John didn't just do it because he had to. He was in it. He was asking questions. And I really appreciate his passion and his commitment to the best work that he was doing. He's doing a great job.
I made it through it.
Okay, we will continue on with our meeting now. Statements from patrons. John, do we have any statements?
There is none.
All right, thank you. And we'll continue on with presentations. And I believe we have our SRO with a safety report for us. If you would care to step up to the mic, let us know what's going on. Appreciate it, Tony.
You know, is it okay if I move this so you can hear me? Or can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay. I actually had to change quite a bit of stuff because I've been so busy, and I did my report and then went, oh, I forgot this. But one of the first things is I'm really happy to be back in the schools. I've really had a good time. Worked that 120 some days that we were out on the road, and I was really happy to get back in here. I'm really happy I didn't get COVID while I was out there. And then we planned on starting DARE. It was supposed to start this last Monday, but because of things that happened over here in elementary, we're going to start on, I think the 25th is the date that we picked now. So once all the kids get back, we'll know more about that. I was contacted by Mr. Webster. I made 8 home visits to truant students that hadn't actually reported to school yet, and I was able to make contact with all but one, and I'm still trying to make some kind of contact with them. Found out that the ones that were on that list, their name just kind of got fallen through the cracks. They were actually enrolled in the Discovery School in Rolla. We had a couple that had just signed up for the alt school. So that was all really good. Been working diligently on the iPad recoveries. We had actual 32 of them that were just out there that didn't get returned after COVID. Students had withdrawn. And as of today, I've recovered 26 of them. I've got 6 more that hopefully this week will actually come back. I've contacted the parents. I gave them all phone calls again today, and the 6 that I had left, they should be here by the end, like tomorrow or next week. So we should be able to recover all 32 of those iPads. The after-school pickup line is doing incredible now. What started out an hour after school, getting all the traffic through, now by around 3:08, 3:10, all the traffic's through and everybody's moving through really good, so that's really exciting. Parents are being really patient with all of it. I've only heard just a couple complaints, so that's really good. A couple of them that I added, I don't know if you guys saw the kindergarten video that I did for the kindergartners, but they had me do a community helper video with the helps of Lieutenant Pig and Chief Jones as my videographer. He did an incredible job. Every time I walk through the elementary now and I see the kindergartners are always talking about that video. And then we also did a real quick little community helpers with the Tiger Cubs also out behind the school. Had the Tiger Cubs there on their little playground, and we were out in the parking lot. and that was a lot of fun. So upcoming projects I'm working on, just in case it ends up being inevitable, a friend of mine is the region director for DARE in our area, and he was showing me a new virtual model of DARE that we might be able to go to in case we have to go all virtual. So I'm checking in on that, on the price of it, those types of things. But other than that, everything's going really good, and I haven't really had many real issues yet this year. Everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, and it's been an exciting year so far. That's about it.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have a livestock report. I think our ag teachers are ready to go.
Yeah, so I'll let Whitney talk about the livestock, because my good thing should have been I didn't really have to do much, because Whitney did just about everything. I just showed up, and she told me what to do, and I listened.
All right, so we were
Good
down.
job.
Be quiet. All right, we were down a few animals this year. That was partly due because of COVID-19. We had a lot of families, since they heard that the Grape and Fall Festival was canceled, they kind of had a fear that the market wouldn't be good, so they kind of secured a buyer at market price and sold them there. We were happy to say that regardless of the situation, the market did hold strong, maybe a little bit better than in the past. We had several returning buyers, but this year I noticed we had a great turnout of new buyers from our community, so I thought that was a good thing, especially the challenges that our community has been facing. We did not hold a buyer's dinner this year, although we did have, let's see, Town and Country Bank, they offered to donate some money to help us with that, but due to COVID restrictions and the health department guidelines, we just decided to sway away from that. So for this year, we sold around 50 hogs. The average price was $333. And then do you guys have this paper in front of you? Okay, so you can see that that was up from last year. I thought that was pretty good, considering the circumstances that we've all been through. 11 steers sold at $280 per pound, 3 lambs at $367. We did not have any rabbits. We did have 2 goats for the first time this year at $325 per pound. And then we actually had a replacement heifer. This was the first year for that, and it sold for $250 a pound. So the livestock show accounted for $95,731.65. 8 hogs were donated back, and the proceeds went to our livestock building fund to help us with the barn fund in the future if we need to do anything to it. 1 hog was donated and sold, the proceeds benefiting our scholarship fund. That was $1,065. We still don't do premiums through the sale, so if you look at the past couple years of records, the total is down. That's because we used to put all of the premiums, which is the additional money that the buyers send to the kids. We used to put that through the sale, but we do not. We have buyers hand that directly to the kids now. Let's see. We have no outstanding invoices. I was pretty adamant on making people pay when they needed to, and I tracked them down if they didn't. We had exhibitors from RFFA, Country Kids 4-H, Royal 4-H, Young Riders 4-H, Little Piney 4-H, Elk Prairie 4-H, and Burbis Valley. Overall, we were very pleased at how successful the event was. We didn't really have anyone complain about it. We thought everything went well. We loved the location we were at. I thought it worked out really well. But overall, it was a successful day.
The one thing she didn't mention is last year's sales. I found them from last year's report was $94,292. So even with less hogs, we still raised more money for the kids. This year, our FFA membership is at 76 kids out of 114, which is a lower percentage than I like, but considering COVID restriction or considering virtual students and we're on the up. So the alumni and supporters group is still meeting the first Monday of every month. They did not do their steak night this year due to COVID restrictions. Next year's executive board is Justin Lortz, Penny Beener, Sylvia Scobie, Carrie Portell, and Marys County Bank, represented by Jake Harland. Other than that, National Convention, we're obviously not traveling to Indianapolis, unfortunately. Instead, it's going to be virtual. It will be during class, so not as fun as getting to go to Indianapolis. But the one thing I didn't want to skip over is the FFA Rodeo. It was 2 weeks before the sale. It raised $8,181.50, which is $500 less than last year, but still really remarkable. I'll be real honest. Whitney and I do zero work for that. Annie and Greg John and Robert Ridley did everything. We just showed up and made sure the kids got on the trucks to put out the barrels, and that was it. So really remarkable. And this year we had to host it at the Rolla Saddle Club. So thanks to those people for letting us host it there. And really, it's a great event. Other than that, we did have some state convention or state CDEs from last year got postponed, so they were virtual this fall. Because Whitney and I were starting, we really didn't pressure any kids to really do them because they were virtual in a different format. They had to be proctored. There was a whole bunch of regulations and stuff, so that we did have some take place. We had 4 kids participate. Trey Riley, Sierra Watson, and Cheyenne all did livestock. Seth Hughes did knowledge. Cheyenne Watson also competed at the district level for job interview. And other than that, vet science, which happened pre-COVID, they placed 12th out of 22 teams last spring. Grasslands contest was the Grasslands team that won state last year was supposed to go to Mid-America Grasslands this summer in June. Got canceled due to COVID, and then Grasslands season got canceled this year from the NRCS due to some government restrictions with COVID and everything. So Eldon is actually hosting a Renegade event, not Renegade, but they're hosting a private schooled event that we're participating in on Monday. A lot of the kids from last year's team are getting to come back and do that to keep their mind fresh, because as far as we're aware, they're still going to be eligible to compete in Mid-America next year. Next June, so that's good. Grasslands. Fall speaking actually is happening next Wednesday. A lot of kids are preparing speeches. 10 categories, 7 students, so 70% participation rate in fall speaking, which is good because it wasn't that high when I was in high school. So we really encourage those kids. A lot of these kids are really eager to do that, and we look forward to hearing what those students have to say on the 21st, which will be in Bell. Trap shooting is going strong. We've had three meets, 15 kids participating, so really good turnout. And we have 1 meet, maybe 2 meets left. The next one is it's Franklin County Trap Shoot. It will be held by the Union FFA. Some other things that we wanted to point out that I didn't include on this thing because they left my mind. Last year's Grasslands team will be recognized at National Convention virtually for being the first place Missouri representative under the Environment and Natural Resources CDE, so you can look forward to seeing that. Our fruit sales ended Monday, so we're still getting them in slowly. We're hunting the kids down that haven't turned theirs in. But the good thing is that last year we sold $19,000 worth of fruit, and this year we sold $36,000. So we doubled our numbers in a COVID year. So that's a
We
success.
might have bribed the kids with some incentives.
We had 9 kids sell over $1,000. 1 kid, and I really do want to thank Phelps County Bank, right? Phelps County Bank? Mm-hmm. Phelps County Bank, for purchasing hams and turkeys. 2 of our kids almost hit $2,000 because of Phelps County Bank. So we really appreciate them supporting our program. We also received a $300 matching grant from Missouri Farmers Care. We're going to match $300. They're going to give $300, and we're going to donate that to the Caring Center for food donation. So that was a part of that. Since we couldn't have our state fair food drive for the kids, Missouri Farmers donated a lot of money in $300 matching grants to whatever chapters applied. We applied and got it. So Caring Center will be receiving $600 from us and Missouri Farmers Care. And then finally, the University of Missouri selected us to have 2 student observers from the Ag Education program. So we'll have actually 2 local kids, Natalie Cook and Trent Stockton from Bell, that are pursuing an Ag Education degree at the University of Missouri. So come and observe us. Questions?
Okay, and one more presentation from Mr. Stammers concerning next year's graduation, possibility of continuing outside.
Just some notes so I don't miss anything. Yeah, just looking ahead at the calendar, barring any snow days, the last day of school is the 19th. With the response that we had having graduation outside this past June, I didn't hear any negative comments about being outside. Everything was really good. So I was looking at proposing May 21st. It's Friday night, 7 o'clock. That seemed to be during that time of the year is a good time. It would allow us, if there were weather, we could push it to Saturday, we could push it to Sunday, or weather wouldn't allow, we can make the call a day ahead of time and have it inside instead. Pending COVID, yes, yes. So that's what we would like to do. We still have the ability to use S&T stage. Got the contact information already. Sound, I would like to do the same sound because that was really, really good last year, this past summer. So I'd like to propose and get it on the calendar and shoot for May 21st, 7 p.m.
Is there any reason to wait till next month to approve that?
I make a motion to approve for graduation, May 21st, 2021 at 7 o'clock at the football field.
I second.
I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Okay, thank you.
Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. That was it for presentations. Moving along, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion.
That was from John.
Second.
And a second. Those in favor? I've got got a motion and a second. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We will move along to discussion topics. The first item we have is quarantine times and other solutions regarding COVID. And
So I'd like to make a comment. We have three discussion topics, and Patrick Stites, who is he works with the health department. He is the official title, Health Emergency Management Coordinator, and he volunteered. He's been doing a tremendous job of communicating with us, and this guy is very, very good. He knows his data. He knows his facts. There are things going on across the country and in our state, and we're hearing things, and there's the ebb and flow of, hey, maybe things are getting better, and you start getting a false sense of maybe we can go back to life as it used to be, and then something happens. And so, I can say I've gotten ahead of myself a few times thinking things are getting a little bit better, and I do get frustrated at Patrick because he gives me this data that completely goes against everything I think that I'm right about, and he corrects me, and he does an outstanding job. So we've had a lot of great discussions. I know that him and Mr. Webster have been on the phone quite a bit. He's talking to our principals, just different people. He's given us very good advice. I respect him immensely. And so he volunteered to come help answer questions for the board, for anyone in the audience. So we have three topics and discussion topics, and I believe Patrick will be able to help us all three of these. Quarantine times and other solutions that was asked to be put on the agenda. Discretionary emergency leave and essential workers. Those are three topics. Now, these are discussion topics. When we develop the agenda, I feel like I need to present all the information out there, right or wrong. I don't think it's just a great time to discuss. We need to figure out where we stand as a school district, which direction do we want to go. If things change, where do we want to go? The premise behind everything so far, though, for me, is we can't go against what the health department is telling us if they can show us the data that it's not a good idea. However, I'm going to keep challenging, and I think other superintendents, other school leaders, we're going to keep pushing and challenging because we're fighting on the other side for students being in school. We have to have students in school. We need our teachers teaching. Quarantines are frustrating, but they're necessary. And we had a quarantine situation even today of a student, or a positive case today of a student in quarantine. Luckily, that student was in quarantine. We didn't have to contact trace. Student was already quarantined. So that hasn't been common, but there's so many things out there, and it's frustrating, and I know it's frustrating. We have people on both sides. No matter what decisions are made, there's going to be some people upset about it, any direction. So, first thing, quarantine times and other solutions. I think this is open discussion time. And Patrick, if you don't mind, if you just come on up and we'll just shoot questions at you.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to get started, my whole position from the very beginning of all this is that I'm not a decision maker in pretty much any of these things. Instead, I'm an advisor. And so I think that it is super important that everybody has accurate, reliable, current information to be able to make the kind of decisions that you guys need to be able to make to make sure that the kids and in all the different aspects of decision making, that everybody's making the best decisions they can for their communities and their facilities and their families. And so I answer just tons of questions from parents and businesses and all kind of things. So absolutely, if you guys have any questions about anything, I would be happy to answer them tonight.
I just wanted to say, as a board member and a parent of kids in the district, I'm very thankful for the job you've been doing to keep our kids safe. I think you've done a tremendous job working with the district and being diligent and quarantining and being very proactive, and I just wanted to say thank you. I don't have any questions for you. I'm very appreciative of what you're doing.
I'm going to take that back tomorrow and make sure everybody knows, because I got to tell you, that is, I know that there's a lot of people out there that feel that way, but that's not what we hear most of the time. When we're calling and talking to people, it's, we understand quarantine is a very big inconvenience, but we have to make sure that we're looking at it the right way. It's not quarantine that's the inconvenience, it's a pandemic that is a global catastrophe. And the things that we're doing are directly in line with the science and the guidance from not just our state, our country, but also globally. And so there are very few spots where the CDC is maybe slightly more restrictive than World Health Organization. But for the most part, like I said, we're in line all the way through. And that's really important because everybody's got to understand, I have a bachelor's in biology. And I have quite a bit of experience with evaluating scientific literature and statistics and those kind of things, but I'm not making these guidance decisions. I'm not setting these guidelines. There are thousands of scientists around the world who are looking at data and are compiling and doing experiments, and then there is a consensus formed from all of these people that say this is the best way to do this thing and here's why. And so those things, I can put those studies in front of you if you want to read them. I can interpret them for you tonight and just like answer questions for you, whatever you'd like. I've got the information.
So a couple things. Couldn't agree more with Tina. I don't envy you. I don't want your job, but I do appreciate what you do. But a couple of questions. So 14 days. I'm sure there's a scientific study from the Google search that I can do. It makes sense. That is what has been determined as the maximum, but it's understood that it's pretty much a large bell curve that within 3 to 5 days, typically somebody shows symptoms. Is there something we can do as a board, as a school, to shorten the quarantine time, whether that is require a negative test, do something of that within a 3 to 5 day period after they've been quarantined that would allow someone to come back earlier?
Sure. So the distribution curve on incubation period is actually skewed, and so when you're looking at the data on these things, they often graph those in what's called a probability density curve, and so you get this thing that kind of looks like a big S. And so The median number of days is somewhere between 5.7 and 7.2 days. They're a little bit different based on studies and what actual statistics they're using. The most recent meta-analysis that I found, that's where they look at all these studies, they compile all that data, and then they try to make the sample size much bigger to try to get it as accurate as possible. Did kind of set that toward the 5.7 mark, but what that means is that half of people won't develop symptoms until after that 5-day mark, okay? So that's important. Now the tests, each test that you can go and do is a little bit different. And they validate them and they give them ratings called specificity and sensitivity. And so the more sensitive a test is, the less number of false negatives there are. So that's really important for what you guys are talking about. You want that false negative rate to be very low if you're talking about ruling out disease. So at 5 days, if your test can pick up viral loads a day before symptoms start, then at 5 days, then you would be picking up anybody whose symptoms would have started at day 6, so then you're talking about 60% of people. So when you guys are looking at, well, is there any way to test out, or what does that actually look like? What you really have to come back to is, what proportion of people who are sick and don't know it do you want to come back into the school? And what does that look like when they do come back in? Because each one that comes back in is going to have a quarantine group associated with it. Quarantine is essentially the only tool that public health has right now to limit disease prevalence and community transmission of the disease. And if you think of it, I've used the analogy a lot that it's like this disease is like a wildfire. So when there's a lot in an area, there's big fire and it throws sparks. So when you have a positive, you have a fire and it's throwing sparks around. So the only thing we do is we just stand around the outside of that and we watch anything that had a spark thrown at it. Some of those will end up developing disease and some of them will not. But we don't know, and they won't know until after they develop symptoms. Well, by that time, they were already infectious for 2 days, and so they were already throwing sparks before they ever knew they were sick. And so keeping people who are exposed away from other people is the only way that we can limit transmission at this time. Until testing technology gets much more sensitive and we can pick up things very, very early in the course, or, we get better therapeutics, and to where if somebody is sick, you just go to the doctor and it's like the flu, you can get Tamiflu or something along those lines. At this point, everything is about a population level from our perspective.
What percentage of people that you're quarantining are ending up with the virus?
That's a very difficult question to answer. It varies, is the real answer to that question. So in the household setting, that's called the secondary attack rate, is very high. If you have somebody in your house, especially if it's the little kid that's positive, because man, I'm gonna snuggle my daughter no matter what, right? So, but in areas with better mitigations, the secondary attack rate is less. But once again, you come back to this idea of kind of a mathematical puzzle. Because the disease is so very contagious, even if you let a few in while they're contagious over periods of days, then you're giving it to a whole lot of people, potentially. And so that's a hard thing to answer.
So as far as data of what we're quarantining in schools or in business, workplaces, anything outside of a family setting, because I understand that logic. We don't have a statistic.
You don't have a set amount. It varies too widely just based upon, like I said, in manufacturing settings, depending on the type of manufacturing and the environmental conditions and how often they clean and those kind of things, versus schools, versus hospitals and doctors' offices. All of those things are going to be different and situational. It's been there's not a lot of really great data on this yet, but it's been suggested that somewhere close to 80% of infections are actually transmitted by 20% of people that get the disease. And so you hear people talk about super spreaders or super spreading events. Some people's biology is just slightly different than others, and so they just emit more droplets when they breathe, when they speak, than other people. We don't know why, and there's no way to tell who these people are. So potentially, if these super spreader peoples, if we had a test or if they just had a big sign on their forehead, we could easily kind of knock this thing out by identifying them and quarantining just those people. But we're not to a spot where that's a viable option yet either.
Last question, and
Sure.
it's because everyone asks me, how do you determine quarantining? Is it a time limit that you're with somebody? Is it if you're wearing a mask? Does a mask even matter? Like if I wear one now and you and I have been in contact for so many minutes, am I still gonna be quarantined?
You will. So there's very specific and set by the CDC. And then I want to touch on masks again, right? Masks are not a determination on quarantining, but we think they're so important, and we'll come back to that. But so when there's a positive, we identify a transmission window. That window is 48 days before symptom onset for a positive, and it runs 10 days after symptom onset. Anyone who comes in significant close contact with a positive during that window has to be quarantined for 14 days from their last exposure with that positive. Now, the CDC says significant close contact is anyone who comes within 6 feet of a positive person for longer than 15 cumulative minutes over the course of an encounter. So, for instance, if you're at a wedding and you have a conversation 3 times for 5 minutes with one guy, he comes back later and is positive within 2 days of you having that wedding, or whoever having that wedding, then you would meet criteria for being a significant close contact.
It takes 15 minutes to get COVID.
It takes 15 minutes for the statistics to say that your risk is high enough that it to be considered an exposure. And they've done a lot of laboratory experiments to get to that number. That's some very complicated math, risk reward, probability. It gets crazy, but that's what's set at the moment is 15 minutes. Now there's a couple other determinations. Certain types of physical contact. If you give a positive person a big sloppy kiss, you're going to be a contact. If you share food, drink, utensils, or certain equipment, I always just use the example of cell phones. You cover that cell phone in spit every day. So if you take somebody's phone and put it right up to your face and you're rubbing your cheek on it, we're going to call you a close contact. And then finally, in a closed space for longer than an hour. And so a closed space is a space with poor ventilation. So if you think of it like a 7x7 office with no windows and a door closed, and there are 2 people sitting in there, and they're 6 feet apart all day from each other, or just longer than an hour. One of those guys is positive, we're gonna call them a close contact. Now, that's relatively new in guidance. What that comes from is there's this increasing understanding. We know that the disease transmits in three ways. The understood primary mode of transmission is through droplets, right? That's when you sneeze, you see those big drops of spit and snot go flying, right? They're big, they move fast, but they're heavy, so they drop fast. So that's why 6 feet, that's where that designation comes from. That's about how far it can fly. Then the other thing we heard about, especially early on in the pandemic, is what's called fomite transfer or contact transmission. That's if somebody sneezes on a surface and you touch it and rub your eyes, right? That can happen. There's been some pretty good studies that have shown as definitively as possible that it did happen. Mostly it's not nearly as likely as just standing within 6 feet of somebody, right? So unless you're walking around licking doorknobs or tasting other people's loogies that they spit out, you're probably good.
Thank you for that visual.
Yeah, you're welcome. Get everybody kind of geared up here. Then finally, the last way is called airborne or aerosol transmission. And there's been a little bit of kind of controversy over this idea, but in the literature it is pretty much got a solid consensus. So what this means is when you're not talking, when you're just sitting in a room breathing, you're emitting tiny, tiny particles of spit, essentially. And so you can kind of picture it like cigarette smoke. So just sitting in a room breathing, you have these little tiny droplets that are just floating in the air, and they gain in concentration over time. And so in a spot that has not very good ventilation, then over the course of about an hour, those concentrations are going to build up high enough that then a person breathing those in could get enough viral load to then go on and develop disease. We can't say this is the threshold. If you get 100 viral particles in your system, then you're going to develop disease. We don't know that. It's different for everybody based on their immune system. And then also the disease, it's different for every disease. But what we can say is that the more you get, the more likely you will go on and develop disease. Now with these aerosols, because the particles are so small, the number of virus inside each particle is much smaller than in the droplets. So that's why you need that. That's why that closed space, that increasing concentration makes the danger level go up. And so that's the increased time. So that's kind of the transmission of it.
I'll shut up now. Sorry.
Don't-
I have like 1,000 questions, man.
John, if you have more questions, ask them.
If you have questions and
It's fascinating stuff.
feel free to call me.
Patrick, you said you'd come back to mask. I do think that just would be important for
absolutely.
people
Thank
to hear.
You, Tim. All right, so we are specifically told, and it is specifically in the guidance, that we are not to consider masks when making quarantine determinations. There's a really good reason why that is. It's because every one of these masks in the room are all different, right? My wife made mine. Some people buy theirs. Some people use maybe procedural masks or surgical masks, or then there's N95s. On top of that, essentially nobody outside the healthcare profession has ever had any formal training on how to properly don and doff face coverings and when you should wear them and how often you should wash them and all those kind of things. Finally, the studies they were all over the board, to be honest with you, as how effective these are. I've seen good arguments that say that, by wearing a face mask, potentially you could alter people's behavior so that they will get a false sense of security and then stand closer than 6 feet, so it could potentially increase transmission. I don't think that we're seeing that anywhere. I don't think the studies really support that that's what's going on. Instead, what we can say from the consensus is that cloth face coverings provide some limited amount of source control. So if I'm sick, I'm reducing the distance that viral particles travel from me to a smaller space around me. That doesn't mean that they're not getting through. It just means we're reducing it some amount. But because we can't say definitively what that amount is, you can't use that for quarantine determination. Plus, I know everybody here has been at Lowe's and seen the chin wearers and the ear loopers and the under the noses and all the different aspects that kind of comes along with it. So there is guidance from the CDC. If you're a healthcare provider and you're wearing proper PPE in the proper situations, then we would term that what's called a protected exposure. But it's not for everybody. And once again, because of how contagious the disease is, it's very important that we're doing the things necessary to keep it down. So just to kind of give everybody, I send out a situational report periodically just so that everybody kind of knows where we're at. The first week in August, we had 24 cases of COVID that week. So the whole week long, we had 24. Last week, we had 183. That number is consistently growing every week. And so every day now, the last week, we had to do 23 positives every day and do the contact tracing and notify all those people. Each person, when we first started this in the spring, few cases a week. When we were calling them, everybody was staying home, so the contacts were around 10. Now when we call somebody, they're somewhere between 20 and 30, and we're calling 20 to 30 people a day. So you can do the math on that. That's a lot of people in a week.
What's your staff count doing that?
6. So, it's real challenging, and we're at a spot in we do Phelps and Marys County both. we're at a spot that we would say for our jurisdiction, there is a moderate amount of community spread. So whereas kind of prior to September even, we would have said, nope, it's minimal. Mostly it's coming in. People are going out to Kansas City or the city, whatever, traveling and getting it and bringing it back. That is no longer the case. It is definitely here. So everybody needs to be aware that, all the time when you go out, you could be coming into exposure with somebody. And so these kind of, the most dangerous thing you can do during a pandemic is concentrate a lot of people in one space at one time. Now there are certain things, like schools, that we think that's super rewarding. That's the most rewarding investment that we make as a country. That's really important that we do that thing. And the schools are working their butts off, doing all the mitigations possible to make sure that when we have positives, those quarantine groups are small, we get them all quarantined so it's not continuing to spread in the school. And so they're doing everything they can, but it's very challenging because there's a lot of people and people are coming in every day. And so as communities, we need to make sure that we're getting the message out that the schools are working their butts off for this. We got to do this stuff at home. And we got to, when people are wanting to do these big events, they got to understand, is it really worth doing that? Because they're not doing what the schools are doing. So when there's a positive at, I don't know, whatever event that's going on, Oktoberfest or whatever, Christmas parade, whatever whoever's wanting to do. When there's a positive there is no way for us to contact trace that. We don't know who those people are. Most of the time they're strangers. They're milling around each other. They're touching. There's all kind of stuff going on. And so it just increases community prevalence. So you guys have a hard job. Everybody agrees that keeping the kids in school is important, that kids learn the best in school. They get these much needed services, whether it's social emotional health or educational health, development, speech pathology. There's so many things you could just go on and on. So we just got to do the best we can to make sure that we're keeping the schools open. Any other questions?
I've got one. We've talked a couple times. You kind of answered it whenever I was listening to you there. I struggle with the fact that we're like, we have a football game. We have kids. We have 22 kids out there on the field at one time. They're sweating, they're spitting, they're bleeding on each other. But we focus so much. We have to put so much energy on the people in the stands having a mask, even though these 22 kids out here are sweating, bleeding on each other, and they don't have the mask on. I think from what I understand from what you just said is a lot of the COVID that we're getting is coming from people coming in spreading, because from what I understand, there's been a lot of schools that have had to quarantine or had kids with positive. We played against a team last week that had 2 positive cases on it. We did not get a positive case, none of our kids got anything from it. So the chances, from your, professional point of view,
Sure.
The chances of getting a positive case in an athletic event, whatever athletic event it might be, are pretty minimal compared to just people sitting in the stands in a close environment for a longer period of time, or?
Well, I tell you, yes and no. So being those people in the stand close together, they're definitely an increased risk. On a football field, there are things that could happen that I would say would be very risky. For instance, if you tackled somebody and got face mask to face mask, helmet to helmet, and we're screaming in each other's face, man, that's really high risk exposure.
I worry more about sports that are getting ready to come up.
Yes, there was a really good study just published for early release out of the CDC journal, Morbidity and Mortality Weekly, that looked at ice hockey. And it was a super spreader event on an ice hockey rink.
I think the one more than that, it's got to be wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you got 9 minutes of
Face to
on top of
face.
each other all the time. Yeah.
Yes. So when we were all talking about this kind of early on, we try to take a very holistic view of the pandemic. And I understand that I'm not an expert in everything. You know, I just got this one thing. And so when we were talking to schools and athletic directors and things, they were telling me, these are important activities. We get scholarships and.
agree that we need
Yeah, so there's something there. If you ask me, is being on a football field riskier than just being a student in the class? I will tell you yes. Absolutely, there is an increased level of risk involved there. And so, especially for practices and things, cohorting there, keeping squads so that you don't have to do a whole team if there's a quarantine, you know, trying to do all those mitigations you can so that when you're on the field, those are going to be limited.
I think Saturday, I know was with Mr. Webster, when you were talking to him, and some of the things that you said as far as like bus rides, you know, keeping windows open during the bus ride so you have good ventilation and things like that. Can like we get tips from you as we move on to the winter sports to where you're not, your winter sports are, you're gonna have less padding on, you're gonna have less clothing on. It's more contact, skin to skin contact than what it is right now in a lot of sports that are happening in the fall. I wanna know, is there things that you can give us and that people in your position can help us to help keep our kids safe, not only to keep them safe for their health, but also for what I feel their mental health so they can keep playing.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime anybody has a question, my phone number is public. I put it out there. Anybody can call and talk to me. And certainly, please do, as you think up specific things, if I don't have an answer, I will get you the answer or I'll get you the person.
For our kids, it's one thing to have them in school, whether people believe it or not, if you haven't talked to a kid, and I can only speak for high school kids because that's what I deal with, but if you haven't talked to a high school kid or a high school teacher, the stress level right now is out the roof. Because kids are scared to death.
Yeah.
That they're gonna get a phone call that they're gonna be quarantined.
Yeah.
Teachers are scared to death that at any minute, they're gonna get a phone call that they have a kid in their class or somebody that tests positive and they're gonna be pulled out. So the stress levels are so high right now. I wanna know, is there things out there, I think we're trying our best to do what we can, but is there other things that we can be doing, or what can we be doing, or what else should we be doing?
So I take part in what's called a Missouri Echo. And what that is it's health professionals from across the state in different specialties that get together along with certain stakeholders to talk about specific issues. So I'm on the COVID and Kids Echo. And today they were talking kind of exactly about that, the mental health aspects of the pandemic, ACEs and how those kind of adverse childhood events affect a person's ability to learn and you know, just their overall success over the course of a lifetime. And you know, we definitely agree that mental health is a very big concern, and you know, we want to be able to do whatever we can for you there. So there are some links, and there's some professionals that you guys can get in touch with, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys do like trauma-informed school stuff and some of those things, and those are good practices, and you know, counselors and doing what we can to support the kids, I think is so very important.
But to me, it's not just the kids, it's the teachers.
Oh yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I mean, and you know, wearing these things, like right now, I'm about ready to go crazy. I can't keep my hands off of it. They're not normal.
Nope.
For me, they're not normal. You ought to watch kids in a classroom. It's not normal to wear these. And I don't know how kids are doing it. I really don't, because I can go to my office and close the door and take mine off, where they can't do that. I don't know how they do it.
I think kids are pretty resilient in a lot of cases, and they're pretty malleable. I think you're right, and that's something that somebody brought up today. Two things. One, that teachers, my wife's a teacher, you guys heard, so I'm well aware of how the extra work that they're going through and the extra time that gets put in and all those things. And then also just the overall stress, because not only are kids worried, but when a kid worries, their teacher worries for them, you know? So those things compound. I wish I had good answers.
You don't have like
I wish. If I had a panacea, I'd give it to everybody. You know, nobody likes masks. They're inconvenient, they're uncomfortable, but when weighed against the reward for it, that you're doing an altruistic sacrifice, that you're going to put your comfort on the altar, and to do that, you're going to protect your neighbor, right? Thinking of it in that way, for me, makes it more tolerable. Because I can say, you know, yeah, I hate this thing, and it itches, and it's whatever. I get ingrown hairs and zits, and you guys have heard it all too, I'm sure. But it's a price I'm willing to pay for you know, the course of it.
I just want to make sure that people, and I know they are, I know you guys are, that people are aware though too, that it's not just, you know, it's not just the kids, it's the teachers, but every little bit of this is just, stress is just, right now is just at an all-time high that I've ever seen.
Yeah, and you've identified it. It's not just schools. I mean, you've got small business owners who can't tell you, especially during the lockdowns. You know, I'm the environmental public health inspector. So I also do food establishments and hotels and childcare. And so during the lockdowns, I had a lot more restaurants than I'd like call and tell me, you know, I was a small business and that's it. We got to be done now. And it's hard for everybody. Nobody wanted a global catastrophe, you know.
I don't know what answers I'm looking for. And probably the answers I'm looking for are probably not out there right now. But
It's called an immunization, is what you're looking for? And it
Patrick?
sucks.
Oh.
I agree, Phil.
Oh, go ahead, John.
No, go ahead.
Well, I know that we said we were going to do this discussion, and I wanted to move away a little bit from the kids to the essential workers. Isn't that under the discussion topics too, that you could answer? I think, Dr. Johnson, you sent us an email out that you were going to have a meeting with the superintendents.
Yes, about
And did you-
essential workers, we did that yesterday.
Yeah, okay.
So
And
Patrick was there.
And you were there, Patrick. And it looked like, from what I read in my board docs, what exactly did you present to them, Dr. Johnson, that you wanted to do?
We just had a discussion. I didn't really
okay.
present anything. We just,
But I noticed you said something here about the 72 hours to return to work, and that Phelps County Health Department didn't recommend it, and neither did any of the other school districts.
the school districts in Phelps County did not.
In Phelps County, yes, because that's who you met. And I'm assuming that's from the information you just gave us about that's not enough time.
Yep.
Even if they test negative. Okay.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. I wanted to just clarify that and make sure I was right in what I read.
So, you know, that conversation about essential infrastructure, I think, is very important. And if you guys don't mind, I'd like to give you a little bit of information about that, what that looks like for businesses who are designated essential infrastructure. So if that was something that you guys are looking at, then you kind of understand what that is. So when I'm talking to a business, and so oftentimes our communicable disease nurses are handling the positives and that kind of thing, and I talk with businesses and organizations, and we try to do preventatives and what everything looks like. So when they're asking me about critical infrastructure, what that really means is there's very specific guidance on CDC that says if you're designated critical infrastructure, these are the things that you have to do. And so what that means is you have to pre-screen for symptoms. And a lot of places are already doing most of these things. So you have to pre-screen for symptoms before you ever come to work. So that's temperature and any COVID symptom, cough, runny nose, headache, dizziness, the whole gambit. Then whenever you're at work, you have to monitor for symptoms throughout the course of the day. So at any point in time, if you get even a mild symptom, that's it. You're done, you gotta go back to quarantine. You have to wear a mask the entire time, and you have to stay 6 feet away from everybody while you're at work. Now, there's pros and cons to doing essential infrastructure, and I always try to walk businesses through this, because if you gotta have somebody to stay open, if you're essential, if you're the only place in the country that makes microchips, your brewer You're the only person in the country that makes these specific microprocessors or semiconductors or whatever it is. Then if you've got too many people out on quarantine or whatever, you very well may get to a point where you have no choice. You have to have people or you're going to lose millions of dollars. And so they have to consider the risk and the reward. If I bring people in and they work on quarantine, but they're actually sick and don't know it, and they're doing everything that the CDC says they have to do 100% of the time and 100% kind of compliance correctly, then there's no risk, and then they should do that. However, I'm going to tell you, everything I do is in compliance, and you just don't ever get that. I think you're doing great. If you get 80% of the time, you're doing really good as far as compliance is concerned. And so what that means is that you're increasing the chance that you're going to spread the disease out through your business, whatever it is. And so then those quarantine periods get longer, more people get infected or affected by it, and so that becomes a really big problem for the business overall. So they have to be very careful if they do the kind of risk and reward evaluation necessary to say, no, we really got to have this person, and this is what we're going to do to make sure that it doesn't spread throughout. Because that's the whole name of the game here is just that math problem. Like how can we have people in here? How does it spread? What does it look like?
So off the wall, the whole high school gets, we shut down the high school because there's a large number of quarantine. And so we send all the kids home, but teachers there were a certain number of quarantine teachers as well. We can safely say we are going to put them in their classroom even though they're quarantined and they are not going to have contact within 6 feet of anybody else. You would consider them 100% safe to operate in their classroom with no one else in contact with them.
I would consider that a relatively low risk situation. I don't know that I would ever say anything is 100%.
Right, understood.
But yes, I would say that, if they're segregated out and they're not coming in contact with each other and you guys have that compliance level as high as you can possibly get it, then that's relatively low risk.
And I get that. People touch doorknobs and there's going
Sure.
to be risk. I get that, but that is a possibility to consider an essential worker if we got to that point.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not sure I understood what you said, John. So if everybody's quarantined except teachers?
No. So like if we have a large breakout in the high school, and
Yes.
our high school virtual plan currently is our teachers teach from the classroom.
Yes.
And we have teachers that are in quarantine and they say, hey, I feel fine. I'd rather come work from the school even though I'm in quarantine.
And there are no kids there?
There's no kids there.
Okay.
That's right. So they lock themselves in the room, they teach, they go home when they're done, no contact with anyone else.
And you feel that's a fairly low risk?
I feel
Patrick?
that's a fairly low risk. Obviously, like you said, there's going to be some issues with cleaning. You're going to have bathrooms to share, and then overall compliance. That you're making sure that somebody that's on quarantine doesn't go and eat lunch, with everybody else or what have you. Not that they would, but those are all things to consider to make sure that you're making that risk is as low as possible. That's always the evaluation is how can we make the reward more rewarding and how can we make the risk less risky?
I think the only time that we would want that is if the teacher's not able to, maybe they have poor connectivity in their homes. If they're able to do it at home, we would like them to stay at home if they're
Right.
quarantined. However, we know that we have many, even, Mr. West over here, he has horrible service at his house, which is in a nice location. There's people that have nice locations, but they can't do anything on the internet. So I think that to be able to have the freedom, if we were to be able to designate a certain person based on a circumstance like that to be an essential worker, that would be really beneficial for education for our kids. And so those are the things that Patrick and I and Tim and Patrick, when we have these conversations, I'm always throwing these types of scenarios at Patrick. Patrick gives me that type of answer. There's never 100% no risk, but there are things, and I'm not trying to be to cause a stir in the community by. I think sometimes it might appear that when we fight for something like the essential worker, that we are, scoffing at health and safety. We're not. Everything that I do when Patrick and I debate, it's always about fighting for the kids who don't have food stabilities, fighting for kids that don't have the internet connectivity at home, fighting for the kids who just need to be able to be at school. And we have a certain percentage of kids, we're a 65-70% free and reduced district, and so we have a lot of kids that depend on the school every single day. And some students don't. They have a very stable home life, and they thrive in the virtual setting. But that's not really the case for all of our kids, and especially at the elementary. And when Patrick and I are talking, it's usually geared around the elementary, because our high school kids, we started out the school year virtually, and it was pretty good, right? Things were okay. There were kinks, but it was okay. We think we can do that at the high school level. We probably can do it at the middle school level, virtual. But there's still some problems. We're having problems. It's not good. We need to be in school, and so I do appreciate, I think we're going to get through this, but we're going to be quarantined. There's going to be people quarantined. We're going to be sending people home, teachers, students, and if we can manage that and find subs, I guess we can try to stay open. But if we can't find subs, and that's the whole reason behind considering teachers essential workers, is because we might not at some point be able to have school. And, there are schools. This is a little bit of a wave across not just our state, but throughout the country. Schools are doing it. Blair Oaks just did it 2 nights ago. Blair Oaks, right there at Jefferson City. They just did it. I don't know if you heard about that. School over towards Waynesville, smaller school, just did it at K-8. Can't think of the name of it. But it's kind of popping up. It is popping up. Now, is it going to work? Is it going to backfire? Maybe.
So
we don't know.
There is some. We're waiting for data, for better data, and one of the things that we can say about this is, as places do this, we can also talk with their health departments and get some of that data to be able to evaluate what they're doing and if it is working, if it doesn't, and try to really dig down into it and say, this is what happened, this is why this happened, to the best of the data that's available. There have been a couple districts that have, gone even further than just essential infrastructure for teachers, and they tried to do it for kids. Newton County in Missouri was the first one to do that, and they lasted 7 days. They also have the highest % positivity for a county in the state. There's another one down in the Boot Hill that had just made that declaration. I was looking them up this morning. They've had 300 cases in the last 2 weeks. So that's a pretty marked increase for them from before. And how much of those things in the county are actually related to the school, wasn't able to kind of get through that far. Unfortunately, not all data is readily available in a way that is accurate and good to use. So, we are watching, and there are states around the country. There are 2 that have said that if 2 people are wearing a mask, then they're not going to be quarantined. They're also in the top 5 for the states with the highest prevalence per 100,000. So, I don't know that those are the best places to look for answers for some of that stuff. But as they do it, we're going to get the data, and then we can almost definitively say, nope, that's a bad idea, and here's why.
Patrick, when I went through my situation, this was an interesting term they used for us. Is they said, people who have COVID, they use isolation, and people who are just exposed are quarantined. Can you kind of define what you really mean by quarantined?
Sure. So once a person is positive, right, then they're isolated for 10 days from their symptom onset date, or 10 days from their positive test collection date if they're asymptomatic. So that makes sure that during the entire time of their transmission window, statistically, that they're not going to be passing the disease to anybody. The isolation means they need to not see anyone. They are actively passing the disease, and anyone that comes in contact with them needs to quarantine because they most likely got it. That's why their attack rate in households is so high. Versus quarantine. Quarantine is 14 days from the exposure with the positive. That 14 days is the statistical incubation period of the disease. So that says that anybody that is going to develop symptoms, 99% of people actually, that are going to develop symptoms will develop symptoms by day 14. And so then we're keeping them from going out and spreading it in the 2 days before they're symptomatic. Now, you can do a little bit more on quarantine, right? You can be around other people in your household. You could go in your yard. You can, stay in private places. You don't need to go into public unless absolutely necessary. You cut your leg, you got to go to the hospital. And then you need to call the hospital and tell them, hey, I'm on quarantine, but I got to be here. So there's a little bit more that you can do while on quarantine. It's not a lot more, but when we're talking with people, I get this question all the time. Somebody calls and says, hey, I was around somebody and they can't leave their house. Okay, are they isolated? Are they positive? Well, no, I think they just came in contact with somebody. Do I need to stay home too? The answer to that is no. We don't track contacts to contacts. The overall risk of developing the disease from somebody that only may have it versus definitely has it is relatively small. And so your risk is not much different than somebody just going to Walmart, and coming into contact with other people. And so we just tell people in that situation, you should self-monitor for symptoms. It's the same thing we tell anybody who asks us anything at all, right? Always self-monitor for symptoms. If you have any kind of symptoms, you should not go out. You should call your doctor, go get tested. We've talked to over 700 positive cases. Oftentimes, they've been out and about during their transmission window, even after their symptoms have started. And so we ask them, if you had symptoms, why did you go to that barbecue? Why did you go to the funeral? Why did you do these things? And they all say the same thing. They say, I have allergies. It felt just like allergies. The first day, I took my allergy pill and went about my day. Throughout the course of that next 24 hours, my cough got a little bit worse. I started getting more concerned. About 12 hours after that, I got a fever, and I thought, oh no. And what we're going to hear, we're coming out of allergy season now. So now what we're going to hear is, I had a cold. These things, it starts mild and it ramps up very quickly. And so even very mild symptoms need to be evaluated. And schools are using algorithms for that developed from Washington University or the CDC or Kansas City Mercy, Children's Mercy. They've all kind of developed different algorithms for school nurses to use that allows them to evaluate symptoms using exposure risk and then also clinical judgment to be able to make those determinations. Hey, this is when we need to send the kids home. I get questions about that a lot. If they have questions, then I get a phone call from a nurse. They say, hey, this is what we got going on. I was unsure about it. This is what I did, but I wanted to call and talk to you about it. What do you think? And we walk through those kind of things because it's hard. You can send kids home with colds, and then you're sending them home. And we don't want them to be home if they don't have to be home. But if you don't send somebody home that has symptoms and they do have COVID, then you're sending a whole classroom, or you're sending a whole quarantine group or whatever home, where maybe that would have been smaller otherwise. So once again, it's just about that risk and probability.
Well, I've been hearing about this, I hope I say this right, the Abbott testing.
Yes.
How reliable is the Abbott testing?
So they talked about that last week on the Echo, and then there was a DESE call about that on Friday last week. The Abbott test that the schools can apply for and get is pretty reliable as long as the student has symptoms. If they don't have symptoms, you should not use them because the reliability goes way out the window. But the specificity is about 1.9%, so less than 2 times out of 100 you'll have a positive, it'll say positive and the kid's not positive.
Okay.
And the sensitivity is closer to 3%. So 3% of the time with a symptomatic kid, you're gonna test them and it's gonna say negative and it's not negative. It should have been positive. overall, that's pretty good. That's not bad for a test at all, especially of
Sure.
the nature that they're going to be getting. It's a very easy to do test. It doesn't require any equipment. It's what's called a lateral flow. And so they take the sample and they basically just put it in a card that's got a dipstick in it and close it. And then when they open it back up after a time period, it's like a pregnancy test is a lateral flow. 2 lines for positive, 1 line for negative.
Okay.
And so we think that's going to be a real game changer for the schools going into flu season. Because what that means is if they're symptomatic, we can know right then, are they COVID or not?
And I'd
if-
like to say that's really what I'm shooting for, is because right now we have that 3 to 5 day lag time where we don't know, and Phelps County's gotten, or wherever they're getting the tests recently, has been much better.
Yeah,
We've been getting
but
quicker tests.
Unfortunately, we just found out earlier today that they're running out of reagents for so that Phelps Health had a 15-minute diagnostic test that's very similar to the PCR test that you hear. Like that PCR tests are the diagnostic gold standard, but those are the ones you ship off for. So the hospitals they see their supplies coming to an end. The hospital's very good at looking down line because they're aware of what this thing can do and how fast it can ramp up. So they're working really hard to get suppliers and get that infrastructure, kind of that logistic infrastructure built up. So we're hoping that they're able to continue that. That has been so very helpful. Any test that takes longer than 72 hours is a wasted test because there's 5 days they've been infectious and out before we're ever able to get quarantine going. And so those kids that were exposed and on quarantine, should have been on quarantine on day 1, have now been in the schools for 3 days spreading it. So
Well, I
we're
just
gonna
want to say
keep
you
on
guys were
trying.
great with us, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to also echo Barb's comments. Patrick I don't know if there's like a comparison of the others and across the state of how good you guys are, but I think we have one of the top people in Phelps County here. So he's so knowledgeable, and he impresses me every time I talk to him. I do challenge him as much as I can, but he always has the data to back it up. So,
Merlin, I appreciate it. Honestly, don't stop. It's important. You are the educational authority for your district. If you weren't passionate for your kids, then that would be a much larger concern. And when you challenge me on things, it's the impetus to go and get that information and to make sure that I'm the most current as I can be. I can give you the information that you need. And, sometimes you say stuff and I go and look and I find something a little bit different than what I thought. And those things are important.
when we're sharing information, Patrick's always asking, show me the data with the mental health. Show me the data with, we have the anxiety, there's studies on anxiety and isolation, suicide rates, and all these things. And our counselors are sharing information with us. And so we get this information and we send it to Patrick, and he takes it, and I appreciate what he does because he's always considering we have our challenges too as a school to try to we do not want to quarantine, but we're going to respect what the health department, what CDC is saying at this time, unless something changes.
Yes,
So,
yeah, and we'll be watching for it. We're gonna stay on the front line. I oftentimes, it's not like people call me and say, hey, we're gonna change the guidance in a week, but because I watch the studies and I see kind of how the consensus is starting to flow on the studies, then oftentimes I'm ahead of where the guidance is. Now, not always, but we try to stay pretty close, and then that way we're prepared for when the guidelines change. We can say, okay, we're ready, here it goes, So, yeah.
6 people, and they're all working from home, isn't that correct? Or some of them are?
No, during the lockdowns, we separated into 2 teams, and half of us would be at home, the other half would be in the office, just to maintain continuity. Yeah. At this point, we're all in the office, but we have our outside doors locked, and where kind of the management group is kind of segregated off from the rest of the services, so that we're handling all of the COVID stuff and all that stuff. And then we still have WIC going on, and we still have vaccinations, and we still have breastfeeding and all the different services that the health department does. And we're offering those curbside and by appointment, basically, just to limit, the crowds of people. We don't have a huge facility.
That's awesome. Thank you for everything.
No, yeah. thank
And
you
on a
guys.
personal note, your kids go to school here and they feel safe at school, and as a parent, are you satisfied with how we're doing things?
I am. I think you guys are doing a very good job. Tim and I were shooting some emails back and forth. I think we're going to try to get some kind of PD stuff going on with the teachers, where I can come in and have the same kind of conversation in a format with the teachers. I like this. Like, these are complicated topics. They require nuanced conversations and thoughtful consideration. So I don't do a lot of presentations with big showy graphs for whenever I'm talking with people. And I do that to Merlin all the time, but whenever I'm out talking, I think that more information actually gets transmitted when people are engaged and they have questions and we're talking through these things, just person to person, even in larger group. So we're going to try to get that going on, I think.
In an enclosed area, regardless of how far apart individuals are, you would still suggest wearing a mask?
We would suggest wearing a mask anytime. We're just going to mirror CDC and say anytime you're outside of your household, you should wear a mask in any situation where it might be difficult to maintain separation from anyone not in your household. So, even though the masks don't affect quarantine, if you talk to people that do kind of emergency things or preventative engineering or anything like that, they talk about what's called the Swiss cheese model. So if you think about Swiss cheese and how the holes are different on each slice, when you start stacking those pieces up, right, those holes don't line up perfectly. So you might get a hole through 2 pieces, but when you add 3, that might block them all. Or maybe you got to add 6. And so though doing those different layers of protection is how you engineer controls to make things as least risky as possible. But when you take something like mask as one level and quarantine as another and put them together, essentially you're lining the holes up. So that's kind of the reason, that's part of the reason, and then it goes back to that other stuff, that people don't wear them all the time. They're not all the same. You got gaiters, you got surgical masks, you got all the different things. I appreciate you guys having me here.
Thank you very much, Patrick. All right. We'll move along to the second discussion topic, which is a bit of a common theme tonight with COVID, and that is discretionary emergency leave. So,
You want me to just start on that?
I guess you just will get started. You
Yeah.
got the background on it.
It's like everything else,
Pretty
COVID, you go all over the place trying to figure out what we should do. The businesses are doing different things, but the majority of businesses, the majority of school districts are, obviously, they're going with the Families First Coronavirus Response Act for the first 10 days, 2 weeks, 10 days, however you want to put it, with their regular pay, no pay changes, don't take personal days or anything like that. Now, the majority of businesses, and as of right now, majority of school districts are the second tier. They're going to personal, or you can go FMLA if you qualify, if you're eligible for that, with the 2/3 pay, or you can use your personal leave. And so that's what a lot of schools are doing is after you use your initial 10 days from the FFCRA, start using your personal leave. And then, yes?
What qualifies you for that?
Yes, well, I mean, it's a big, long list of things. I mean, most people probably would qualify if they have a serious situation health-wise, whether it be themselves or even someone in their family. So, and I can get you that information, Barb. It's a bunch of information. Well, the problem with FMLA though is that according to the law, it's at 2/3 pay, and when you start doing that, that really messes up the PSRS and retirement, and that's something that I don't think teachers are going to want to do, and I don't think teachers or staff through the peers are going to want to get 2/3 pay. That's punitive. That's not a good thing. So I think my goal and recommendations is that we want our staff each month when they get paid to not get less money. That's the goal. Well, there is a reason that teachers accumulate, and especially those that have been here a long time, they're going to have personal leave days. So they could take those personal leave days if they go over that 10 days, if they get quarantined a second time. That's what the majority of businesses and schools are doing. And then if someone, let's say someone doesn't, if they only have a few days, they use those, then what schools are considering, many schools are considering, is that the school district would ante up, which it costs money, and that's not in our budget, so it's a budget decision. If the school were to decide to do a discretionary emergency leave after the 10 days, and then after their personal leave time, if they don't choose to do FMLA or qualify, they don't have to do FMLA even if they qualify. So if they once they run out of their personal leave days, then they could go to, if the school district decides to do something like this, some school districts are doing an additional 10 days. So I know that it's kind of popping up. It's kind of like these, schools that are designating teachers as essential workers, right? These are kind of popping up. Now school districts are starting to pop up to give an additional, so now there's 20 total days that if someone gets into quarantine, a double quarantine, they're not going to be penalized using up their personal leave time. Now, the bad thing is if someone doesn't have, they're a first-year teacher or first-year employee, they don't have a lot of days built up. If we don't do it, even after, let's say they get in a third one, at some point, if they're missing work over and over and over and over again, if they get caught up in a fourth or a fifth, we can go as extreme as we want to go. If they don't have personal leave days, does the school keep paying for that? If they've already gotten their 10, and then they've used up what they have as personal leave, and then they get a bonus 10 from the school district, if the school district decides to do that. After the 20 days, and they've used all their days, then what? That's the difficult thing. Right now, what we've been doing is just, we haven't got there yet. We have one person already, a teacher, who's in the second quarantine, but we're not really there yet because we're trying to do what a lot of schools are doing. If teachers doing some work, we're giving them credit, even though we're getting a sub for them. We're getting them credit if they're trying to do something that's dealing with their primary responsibilities of teaching. We're like, you know what? They did some work. They're actually teaching. They're helping do different things with grading or whatever. We're saying, you know what? They were gone 10 days, but they did like 3 days worth of work, so they're only gone 7 days. So this is so complicated, and no one has an answer. No one. I'm talking to everybody across the state that I know who's dealing with these same things. No one really has an answer. So I got some examples that you can see there, different school districts that have done some emergency leave policies. I really like the language. Springfield had a really nice one. If you want to focus on one of those, Springfield's, they had a very nice one that they just come up with a brand new policy that is very good and well worded. I will say that our legal counsel, Tom Minkus, recommended kind of giving some guidelines. He said something like, if you're quarantined twice within a 3-month period, then you could be eligible for the discretionary emergency leave that the district would approve. He said it doesn't have to be 10 days. It can be any day you want. The school could say, we'll ante up to 5 days. And then after that, employees on their own. It could be 3 days. It could be whatever you want it to be. But at the end, if it's an extreme case with an individual, I guess we're going to have to talk about it. What I would like to do is just keep trying to treat we always try to treat our people right. We don't want anyone to get less money. If we get to a point later in the year, I mean, I kind of want to just keep treating our people right. But there might be some strange scenario where someone misses 3 months. It could happen. We're already at a point, somebody's already at almost a month. We have an employee right now that's on their second quarantine. When you put those together, that's a month, right? So it could happen. One idea that I had is a 5-5-5 approach, where you take, after the 10 initial days from the FFCRA, the Families First Coronavirus Act, is that the district would allow 5 additional emergency leave days. The district says, here you go, here's 5 extra days. So now we're at 15. Then, so the employee maybe has a little skin in the game, and there is a little bit of discussion among staff that, you know, some people might not be as responsible as other people. Some people might be doing stuff on the weekends and putting themselves out there to be subject to a quarantine way more than other people who are more responsible. So the little skin in the game, maybe that second 5, they take personal leave days. And then if they run out after that, then they go back to, and the school could do 10. They go 5 school, 5 personal leave, 5 school, and then school's done. If that's what some schools are doing, some schools are just saying, here's another 10. But anything that we give is money that wasn't budgeted. This is, there's a chance we're not going to get that money back. And so my concern is this what the taxpayers would want us to do in our community with school district funds? I think some would, many would. That's why I need your input. John?
2 things. One, as far as statistically speaking, what are the number of teachers that have been quarantined due to something outside of the school versus inside of the school?
So I can't give you exact numbers. I can talk about that, though. That's a hard one. That's kind of like Patrick's saying. That's a hard one because we know that some of these quarantines were school-related. But
well, we should know that exact number.
But
right?
there's a couple that we know that we think are not school-related. They think it's, no one doing anything wrong. It's just that they're living their life, right? People are living their lives. So because they are friends or they are a spouse with, or it's home-related. And so I can say let's just say we have people that we know that are quarantined because of personal things going on the weekends. That's going to happen. We understand that.
Not arguing that, but you made a comment earlier about school-related versus outside the school. So that's kind of what I'm trying to tie together. I don't feel that we can discriminate unless we have that data. I don't feel that we can say, hey, this one's school-related, we're going to go this direction, this one's not, you've got to use your personal
And we
data,
talked,
unless we statistically can lay that out.
We talked about how can we identify that, and the only really way we can identify that is to have some sort of questionnaire or a series of just questions to say, when, how do you think you got, where do you think you got, and we have to trust their responses, But then who's going to be the judge, jury, and executioner on that? So.
Well, the CDC or the health department is contacting the school if it is a school traceable event.
Yes. So we could use the health department's input on.
I don't even know that it's a good idea. As far as the 5-5-5 approach, I would agree with that. I think that makes the most sense because I do agree that, they're given these personal days to be able to use them during sick time. That doesn't just include COVID. That includes the flu. That includes allergies. That includes any other sickness. COVID is, at the end of the day, it's a sickness. It's an illness. And I think the school district stepping in and allowing an additional 5 days up front is a big deal. And I do agree it's a monetarily big deal as well.
Well, right now, it would be recognized through the end of this calendar year, which is December. I do feel that it'll probably be pushed out into June for school districts. But right now, if we were to do this, I think we would just say through December, and then we would revisit it again at the end of December for the spring. So
Is the 555, would that only exist for COVID-related illness?
it would need to be a quarantine ordered by the county health department.
Or isolation.
Or yeah, anything that's
COVID-related.
COVID-related, quarantine or be positive case. So,
Can I just say one?
yes, please.
But just when it comes to tracking and where you got disease from, and especially in schools why it's so difficult, 45% of kids will be subclinical in presentation of the disease. That means that you won't have a clue that they have it unless you test everybody in the school to find it. And so that can be very challenging to say where these things came from here versus there. And then also, especially where we are at a prevalence level, once again, you could go to Walmart and somebody could come behind you and cough and it'd be just the right spot and you turn right into it and you could get it right there. So it's very difficult to tell.
Let me rephrase. I understand it's difficult to say where you got it, but you can determine where your quarantine is.
I think
You can determine where your quarantine is coming from, can you not? Because you
Well-
would quarantine a teacher because a student tested positive.
the quarantine you should be able to
You
because
should be
of,
able to, the illness.
Not the positive.
I
Yeah.
completely understand.
The positive would be the tough one, John, but
I agree.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough to trace a positive. I'm not arguing that.
so they've already taken the first 10 from the federal Families First coronavirus. Then they would get an additional 5 to make that 15. Straight up from, if the board approves this, so we're going to talk about this later. If the board approves this, then they go up, it'd be a gift of 5 more days from the board because of these difficult times. Now they have 15 days. And then we're going to say, now you take 5 days of your personal leave. So now they're at 20 days, but they paid for 5 of them with their personal leave, but they're still getting their pay the same each month. So they're not, hopefully, unless it's someone doesn't have days, then there's going to be possibly some people that use up all their days that might, when we get to that point, when we get to days 16 through 20, and they don't have the days, they're going to want a doctor check. And that's tough. That's tough. If this is what's approved. And then we get to a day, then we get to 5 more after that. So that would be up to 25 days, but they're paying for 5 of them.
Can you legally supplement FMLA?
Can we supplement?
Can you supplement it? So they're getting 3/4 pay from FMLA?
I don't know.
Provide the
I don't know if we
additional
can
4
legally
legally.
supplement that. What do you think, Susan? That would be, we have to look that one up.
Are we currently, go ahead, getting reimbursed for CARES money for our quarantine staff?
We are hopeful that we will, but we don't have that money yet. We're applying for that. There's no guarantees. So this is a gamble. Schools are doing it. Some schools, but not the majority are doing it right now. What's that? And we are paying for subs. Even in the cases where we're giving them credit when they do work, when they're teaching, but yes, we still have to have a sub here to watch the physical kids, right? So the school's already taken on the subs, and then we're trying to be fair to the teachers who are teaching and doing a tremendous job by not counting those as quarantine days when they're actually, like, we have some awesome, all of our teachers are just working so hard, but we have some teachers are really just stepping up, and they are doing things that you would be amazed to see what they're doing while they're home quarantined. And they're working hard. So, I'm always hopeful that when school districts try to do the right things, that in the end, there will be, that CARES money will come through. We're turning it all in. It's all, every time. We have special codes that every day we're getting new codes. And they are, Susan and Lindsay are working very hard to keep up with all that every single day. And every time, Lindsay has a spreadsheet for every teacher that's on quarantine, and we keep log of their day. if they're actually working for the school or if they're not. Some are just disconnecting because it's really hard for them to work for various reasons. And they're just doing their quarantine, and they're just taking their quarantine days. Some are working. So based on the circumstances, some can, some can't. I don't have all the answers to this because every day is something new.
I feel like we addressed this before school started. What was your proposal then? Because I know we discussed this a couple times.
For this,
Yeah,
I don't-
well, when we were talking about taking leave and what we were gonna do, I mean, I know Barb asked, I remember her specifically asking you questions, and you had a proposal, and I went back through board docs and couldn't find it. What was the remind me what the discussion was and what
it was,
changed.
I don't think it was a formal agenda topic. I think it was just a question. And, I don't know. I mean, it's changed so much every day. I think as a district, we always try to give the teachers the benefit of the doubt. I think it was a question that was asked.
I asked a question about.
Yeah, I remember that, and I vaguely remember we will get to it when we get there.
Well, I think something along the line of, they were at home and they were capable of working.
Oh, that was the 100% virtual. So when,
But if they were interrupted by their kids or something.
right, so that's a totally different topic.
But I think we talked about the fact that, explain this before school. Sorry. To explain before school started to the teachers, because some teachers had come to me this summer and asked, how is this going to work? And one of the teachers had several kids, and they were afraid if
Yeah.
several of their kids got quarantined, were they going to end up losing all their personal days, sick days?
Right.
And so that's what I addressed, I think, to you at the end.
Yes.
And Tim at that time.
So, I think as a district, we're going to try to make sure that our teachers are taken care of. We don't want anyone to start getting, if there's if there's a teacher that just gets caught up in quarantine, whether it's their children or themselves, unfortunately, the school's probably going to take the loss. And that's typically what happens, so that we can take care of our people. On the 100% virtual, that's the shutting school down. And we're talking about we want our teachers to come to school and work. And some teachers won't be able to, if we're shutting school down because of coronavirus, we're saying that we don't want kids at school, right? Well, then the question was, can they bring their kids to school if they don't have anyone to watch them? Well, that's a tough one, right? Because we're not supposed to have kids at school. We're shutting school down so we don't have kids at school. But that teacher doesn't have internet at home. So what do you do? And so those are things that I don't have an answer until we're going to have to figure it out when we get there. We have that, if we remember, we went over that sheet that had all the criteria, and we're going to apply that. I think we'll get pretty close to it, but there's always going to be something we didn't think about. Because every time I think I kind of got it figured out, I get turned around and I don't have any of it figured out. So, and I feel a little better every time I talk to John Earnhardt at Cuba or Craig Hanselman at Rolla, and they're just like me, so they don't know either. We're trying to do what's right for our people, and when we get to this in the agenda, I'd like to, for the board to consider 10 additional days, but it's going to be at a cost. Hopefully, we won't have a whole bunch of people getting double, triple quarantine. But you never know. I think that after they get the second quarantine, they'll really start changing how they do things, possibly. Like, they'll be running from people. Like, right? Don't get near me. So, I don't know. I can tell you that teachers are so, and me, all of us, we're so accustomed to gather when it's time to eat. Break time. What do we always do? Especially elementary. Elementary teachers yearn to be able to have adult conversations. And so now we're telling them, you cannot have any adult conversations ever. And from 8 o'clock to 3, you are 100% with kids. They eat in the room with their kids, and this is everyone, high school teacher, everyone. They are not socializing. They're not, and this is this mental fatigue, this brain fog. This is affecting everybody with the stresses of dealing with just the minor things of COVID. School is not school like we remember it right now for kids. Now, Patrick's right. These little ones, they're so resilient. They got these masks on. They're just rolling. I watch the kids in the playground. Over half of them have their masks on while they're playing. Kids don't even know they have it on anymore. It's like embedded into their skin now. So the 555 is kind of where I think the board should consider that. If you don't want to do it, I respect that as well. It does cost money, and we don't have a lot of that.
Do we have any idea what it could cost? Like, is there any thought there?
It just depends on how things go if things get better. There are times I think I wish the government would just say everybody stay home for a month. I think things could be better. There are times I think that would be better. We just stay away from everybody for what would that do, Patrick? 1 month. What would 1 month do?
Well, Patrick, we're glad you stayed.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I stayed too. So it would definitely lower prevalence. So be very careful what I say here. I have been modeling the way this thing looks, trying to have some kind of predictive value since the beginning. I'm pretty good at about a week. 2, I'm not so hot, but anything after that's a complete shot in the dark. But we're not seeing a lot of hope right now in the communities. We get a lot of pushback. We get a lot of people that when we call them and they're positive, they don't want to tell us contacts. There's a lot of talk about civil liberties and all these different things, and they're concerns. They're valid concerns. But I disagree with their conclusions as to what they think should happen because of those concerns. So that's where we're headed. If the situation in the communities don't get any better, we're going to be in a spot just like Florida and Texas and Arizona and California and the whole Sun Belt that exploded a month and a half ago. And that's coming. I'm not going to tell you the timeline, but that's where we're headed. When you get to that spot, preventions no longer work. There's just too much. It just doesn't work. The only thing you can do, the only cure, is lockdown. So I try so hard to convince people for the last 6 months while everything was really low. We got to do these preventions. We got to do these things. If we do these things, we can keep the levels low. You pay me now or you're going to pay me later. And that's the disease. That's it. You're either going to do the preventions now and your disruption's going to be a little bit every day all the time, or eventually you're going to get to a spot where you're going to pay big. And I think that's where we're headed. I hope that I'm not right, but we are the show me state. And my concern is that this is not real for a lot of people, and it won't be until they have it or their grandparents have it or, our ICUs are full. We're in conversation with the hospital and I watch the Medical Hospital Association's dashboard to keep a pretty close track on what the hospital situation is like. We actually just bumped up on their designation from green, yellow, orange, red up to yellow. That means that we have less than 30% ICU bed capacity left in our region. So in our region is the Southwest region. It's big, essentially from us all the way over to the edge of the state and everywhere south of us. So a very big region, and we're seeing that just climb. So that's what I'd tell you is that it's not a real bright picture.
To discuss on that.
Like you said, Dr. Johnson, is I think we need to do everything we can to keep our employees, not the right word, is satisfied is not the right word, but keep the stress level down on them, because I know if I were one worried about it, because it's not something under my control. It's like I got to save all my sick days because, you know, I'm going to get that call to be quarantined and I can't lose the money. So I'm going to come to work even though I don't really feel good and I probably would normally use a sick day. And I don't want them to feel like they have to do that. And so I'm all for this plan as long as we can, you feel that we can afford it in our budget.
And I
And
can't.
maybe we need to come back and revisit it, like you said.
I think we look at it through December and we see how that impacts us financially. And with the odds, with the chances of it might not being reimbursed, we'll do some more digging on that, and then we'll revisit again in late December, early January for the spring.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Are COVID-related subs going into CARES money also?
Yeah, anything that's COVID, we're applying for.
Okay.
Anything. I mean, we're applying, I mean, every school is. If we have anything that we're doing because of COVID, we are labeling that, putting it on a list. Susan's got like 10 different grants that she's working on at the same time.
So, I mean, we're labeling this worst-case scenario, but it could end up, I mean,
It could, I'm hopeful that we'll get some sort of relief. And we did, and when I give the financial report, Governor Parson, you know, just released some new monies that's going to be coming out to school districts, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. I think it's the right thing to do at this time. We can always change our minds if we feel like it's the wrong thing to do later.
so if I'm reading this right, what you want us to approve is basically a second quarantine for everybody.
They get 10 more days on the school, but they have to do 5 of them in the middle. 5 leave days. They get 5, then they do 5, then we give them 5 more. So they have a little bit in it.
Didn't we do something years ago with the maternity same way, that they could only use, they had used so many days of their own, but they didn't lose them all on maternity leave? Do you guys remember this?
I don't know about that.
Okay, but I think there's something where they don't lose all their personal days. So.
Well, we have like a sick leave pool, something like that. Yeah. And do we still have anything like that right now? No. Do you have any more
Okay.
questions?
All right, we'll continue on with discussion topics then. That approval will come later, team. And that is the issue of essential workers. Whether we should designate our staff as essential workers. The law allows us as a school district to designate our teachers and staff as essential workers and have them come back with all the extra precautions, as Patrick stated earlier. And as you can read, legal counsel is in favor of us declaring teachers as essential workers. Obviously, that relieves us of any legal I don't want to say legal responsibilities, but it gives us a lot more leeway and not have to be concerned about any legal issues.
Kind of feel like until the health department as well as DESE approve this, I don't think we should approve it yet.
I would agree.
I'm 100%.
I agree
behind
100%.
that.
Yes, absolutely not.
Is there any scenario, before we move on, like John was saying, would there be any scenario that we would consider it though?
Not for me.
Not for me, it wouldn't be.
Yes, if we go 100% virtual at the high school level, middle school pending, I would like to talk about that, yes.
But at this time, no. So the problem with that is when we do that, when we go 100% virtual, it's going to happen real fast. And so then are we going to scurry and try to get together and deem as a board, we're going to approve that employees, that teachers could be essential workers under these very, like, tiny these confined circumstances.
I mean, we can do it now, we can discuss it now, that's fine.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand about the virtual, if we're virtual,
Teachers can't teach at home because they don't have.
Right, and
If
then
we
they
go
come back.
100% virtual, we're back
Right.
to what we had discussed a couple of months ago, where
Right.
if the teacher can work from his home or her
Yes.
home, then they can work.
yes, if they're not interrupted by kids or whatever the case might
Correct.
be, all right?
Yeah.
I guess I'm getting, this 72-hour thing is what's bothering me.
So what I'm worried about, Barb, is we go virtual, but we went virtual because we had an outbreak, and we have 4 teachers that are quarantined. Well, according to essential workers, if they're quarantined, after 72 hours, they can get a test, and if it's negative, they can come back to work. Now, go ahead, yeah, I don't.
Technically, by the current critical infrastructure guidelines, you don't have to test. So if you're just quarantined, you can come in. So you guys, that's an additional thing that you would be adding in. If you're looking at that route, you might extend, instead of say day 3, you might go a little bit further just because you're really not gaining that much at day 3. Most people kind of develop symptoms, kind of later in their course.
Right.
But that bit is it's not required under current critical infrastructure. If they're quarantined, they can have those people in that same day that they're notified, if that's their choice. As long as they follow those very rigid spots. This is what the CDC says you have to do.
So John's is they could be deemed essential workers if there's a need for them to be at school and no students would be at school.
No one would be around them. They'd lock themselves in their room if they're in quarantine. Yeah.
And the health department does not, according to this, you do not recommend this, is that correct?
Well, actually, what you guys are talking about is a little bit different than what we were thinking about whenever you guys were talking about critical infrastructure.
Well, yeah, I think maybe that's where I was confused,
Yeah,
yes.
so, under typical critical infrastructure at a business, these people are going back in and everybody is still there, right? So the concern for teachers is that there's so many people in a school, there's so many kids in the school, they're all going out, taking that back home, that their kids are a very big concern of becoming a vector of the disease and taking that back out and spreading it. But if the kids are not here, that's a different consideration. And so if you guys are talking about it in a way where you say, no, we got this big facility, we got this big school building, and we've got 30 teachers or however many teachers, and we're saying they're in their room, they're using the bathroom that we designate and going back to their room. We can regiment times, we can do all these things to make sure that they don't come in contact with each other at all. That's a different conversation. I think that's something that we could definitely get more on board with.
Okay, I agree. And the way I understood this, I thought that from reading this information in here, is that we were saying that if somebody was quarantined and in 72 hours, if they were tested negative, they could come back to work.
And that's
which
what
is what it says here.
That's what a lot of schools are doing, and that was
Even with kids?
Teachers.
No. And kids in the building. This is how I read this.
That
we were allowing.
We are not, other districts.
No. I'm saying if we would pass this, that we would say if a teacher was in quarantine. Now, make sure I understand this. The way this is written here, it says if they get a negative test after 72 hours, they can return to work. I'm going to assume that's while school is still going on with kids, with other teachers. Am I correct by reading this?
This is information. This
Right.
Is not
No, I'm just saying, is that what that means?
Emotion. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So okay. So again, let me make sure. We're saying that if a teacher is in quarantine and school is in session, that if in 72 hours they would test negative, they would be allowed to come back to work.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
No, but that's what, I'm saying, John, that's what this is saying.
This is
If you
just
read this.
information that other districts are providing, that's correct. Other districts are doing this, Merlin brought it to our attention.
Sure,
What
sure, I
I'm
understand
saying
that.
is, he's asking us to make a decision now, or to have a discussion as to, hey, if we're gonna create essential work environments, if we're gonna create something that we allow teachers to be designated essential workers, how is that gonna look? What I would like to consider is if all students are at home, we have a teacher that is in quarantine, that we allow them to be considered an essential worker.
But I'm with Patrick on that. That's a whole different situation than what it is stated here. And that's, I'm just trying to distinguish between the two. I understand what you say. If nobody's here, that's totally different. I would have a very difficult time bringing a teacher back after 72 hours because they tested negative.
Yeah,
I think we all agree with that.
I think.
I beg your pardon?
I said us as well. We moved
Okay.
out,
I don't think anyone at this point is, I think John brought something
Yeah, I
up that
think we all
wasn't,
agree to that.
Okay.
John brought something up that isn't here. He brought something, a new concept, which seems
Yeah,
like a good
because
idea.
And that's only, my understanding is you don't wanna have to call a special meeting if we go into lockdown. You want us to make a decision on an essential worker today.
If there's no threat to students' exposure, I mean, I would obviously, if, with the circumstances, I would communicate with you and say, I think this is an essential worker designation. And if you don't agree with it, we won't do it, you know? I'll just ask the board about every individual, you know, if that's the way we want to do it. So I think that this is a scenario that could really happen with the direction that we're going. At some point, school's going to be closed. And during that time, there's going to be teachers who are going to be quarantined.
Our current, and sorry, my mind, I've slept. What is our current situation as far as virtual for the middle school? Is it teachers teaching kids? Our teachers teaching is our middle school virtual, correct? Okay. So I would like to consider what I am proposing for middle school as well.
So if we go under a lockdown, our teachers would be teaching our elementary kids too, correct? That's the way I understand it. I mean, I
Yes.
understand they're on
Yes.
that program now, but if we shut down, they're on that too. So it would actually
For
affect all
now.
3 schools.
Correct. Yeah, I would be interested to see if we would go that route, just from what I've read about other school districts and elementary schools trying to teach their kids virtually versus using a program.
We would pay for the year-long program for all
Yeah,
the kids. Okay.
But that's a different discussion.
So,
I see where you're going.
Right now, I understand what he's proposing. Realistically, what is your perception of our staff that this would actually impact? Because I see it being very small.
It'd be very small.
So, like, maybe we're fighting over 3 or 4 teachers here?
Yes.
Is that,
But-
okay.
But it's very likely that it's going to happen.
Okay, so my other question is, and I may be totally off base, but I remember reading something along the way where they were having 10 days worth of lessons uploaded in case of possible quarantine anyway. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if this teacher is quarantined and we shut down our school, they already have 10 days inside of Canvas for our children.
They
So
are supposed to, yes.
What is this, I mean, I guess, are we gonna
That's-
quarantine more than 2 weeks, do you think?
Oh.
I mean, is there
Well,
a possibility?
School's going to be shut down for more than 2 weeks, and teachers could be in and out of quarantine during that time. So I can't guarantee any of this. I don't know.
Right, no, I'm just asking, like, I thought that, you know, there was, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't have answers.
My point of view, there's no way we can go full virtual anyway. Our kids don't have good internet. Absolutely no way we can do that. I don't.
This is a very bad situation. I mean, if we get to the point where we have to shut things down and we can't have those kids that were able to come when we shut down our high school, it was a great thing for them to be able to be the ones that were here. But if we actually have to shut down, it's going to be very difficult for those kids that don't have internet. The teachers are going to actually have to figure out a way, whether it's flash drives, where they're downloading the assignments and going delivering those to their actual homes, picking them up every other day or at the end of the week. Teaching and learning is not happening. We are playing school when when it gets to that point.
families with multiple kids, and you found out if you got a kid and they're trying to Zoom.
Can I ask you how many kids came in during the high school shutdown, and do you think that,
It started off,
Started out about 80, and we finished with probably 30. So it dropped significantly.
dropped, but we're, I mean, right now, kids that are virtual, kids that are quarantined. Very few kids have good enough internet where they can get on and Zoom all day long and understand they're constantly getting kicked off. And you got one high school and one in middle school.
Shutting school down is a very bad thing. We're doing everything possible not to shut down. And I know that when we had our situation last week, we're hearing people saying it's time to shut school down. And I had conversations with Patrick. Patrick, I said, is it time to shut it down? He's like, no, you guys are doing comparatively very good. You've had a little series of positives that's quarantined kids in all 3 buildings, but they're not connected. That's a positive. And so we're doing great. Now he's saying it's going to get worse. So it could get worse, but I still think we try to stay open. And we're going to be talking about a hybrid plan coming up, but the things I'm hearing at Rolla right now, that's not the best situation either, the hybrid plan. We're going to discuss it because I feel like we need to discuss everything right now. There's so much. And this is a typical board meeting right now with COVID. Board meetings are going to last 3, 4, 5 hours, You might need to take a break, get some dinner and come back till midnight.
Well, that was my next question before we totally shut down about the hybrid model that we might be able to use. I know it's on the agenda to discuss, but yeah, I don't think anybody wants to totally shut down. I don't think that's the thing that we want to do at this point.
As we anticipate for things to get worse, do you think it's a feasible option to increase our efforts?
For like prevention?
Mm-hmm.
Mask all the time for everybody. I would say Patrick, he's complimented us as being possibly one of the better districts in the area. We could we could push masks more with our little ones, I guess. Our high schoolers are wearing them all the time, right? Most of the time.
They can spread out in the classroom.
So they do have some autonomy there to take it off.
Since you guys brought that up, where did the 3-foot thing come from? Patrick, can you help me on this?
No World Health Organization said their guidelines started and kind of still are at 1 to 2 meters is what they say. So when you look at the studies about risk at 3 feet, which is roughly a meter, the risk level, if you're closer than that, it really jumps up. And then for every meter past the first one, the risk reduces by a much smaller amount. And so the CDC said in their designation, well, we want to go not just the 3 feet where the biggest part of that is, we want to go a little bit farther. We want that risk to be even a little bit less because we think where we are as a country when we're setting these designations is bad enough that, how it spreads and our overall lifestyle versus, a country in Africa or what have you. The way our culture is, it's important that we go that extra distance to lower the risk. So that's kind of the designation there.
3 feet is what we were told is 3 feet per school if you're all facing the same direction, correct?
So the guideline from the CDC is anyone who is within 6 feet of a positive for longer than 15 cumulative minutes has to quarantine. So the 3 foot rule isn't really is not in effect here. And then you guys were talking about hybrid, and I've talked with Dr. Hounsome and Dr. Dare both, and I know that they are having some challenges with that. And I will tell you, from our perspective, we're like, this is great, because we were doing these big quarantines, and now when they have one, essentially they have nobody on their list, because every classroom, except for three, they have 3 classes throughout the course of the entire day where the kids are not farther than 6 feet apart.
Okay.
And so, you know, as far as in the academic setting, that makes those quarantine groups small. And we are just like you guys. We do not want to quarantine kids if we don't have to. But we're aware that if we don't, there's going to be a geometric increase in the amount of positives that you have. It's very, very necessary to quarantine people, not healthy people. We're not quarantining healthy people. We're quarantining people who are exposed to the virus and have an increased risk of having it and transmitting it to others.
Okay. I agree with you about ramping up things. If we're gonna do anything, I don't wanna slack off. I would rather move more aggressively. But I do wanna go back to what you wanted to advocate for before we skip topics.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good with whatever. I just don't want to, I can tell you, talking with teachers and talking with coworkers who are working from home with quarantined children, that when that child gets on Fortnite, that their internet crashes. And when that child decides that, so we have workers that are at home with quarantined teachers and are quarantined children, and they are having to do their schoolwork or their housework, whatever, that's internet related in between Fortnite fights. And so I don't want to put our teachers in a position to where they don't have the ability to come into school. Yes, could it just be 2 or 3 teachers? No doubt, but I have a feeling the number of teachers that would rather come to the classroom even during a shutdown is much higher than that. And as far as quarantined, if we have an outbreak to the point where we say we're not even to a point where we can use the hybrid, we could be talking about half our staff being quarantined right away. And so those are the things I want to consider. 14 days is a long time, especially getting into the part of the school year that we're getting into.
Dr. Johnson, these other schools that are not one-to-one like us, they don't have computers and all this, what are other superintendents talking about what they're doing? Like, are they having papers printed out for these children and then they come by and pick it up from their school, or
Yeah,
what are they doing?
It's a variety of things, but typically the ones that don't have a lot of technology are just doing paper drop-offs. School buses, they're using their school buses to drop it off, and then teachers are on the buses. Teachers are from a distance explaining anything. It's a lot of work, but it's great. It's good stuff, but it's here's your work. We'll come back in 2 days or 3 days. If you have any questions, email us. Well, they don't have email, so it's not good. And everyone's trying. Every school district is putting forth tons of effort, and everybody's trying. I don't know if you heard anything else. People are trying.
I appreciate everybody's opinions and Patrick and everything, and we're all in this world of nobody knows. Nobody knows what is the correct thing to do. We're trying to do the best we can for our students, our teachers, our staff, everybody. So we have a room full of pretty smart people here that are trying to do this, so.
Thank you. We have a good school, and unfortunately, we're in a better spot than some other schools when it comes to technologies. It's just the kids that don't have internet at home, and that's a bigger issue than school. That's not we can't fix that, so we can do a lot of things, but that hotspot, a lot of people say, hey, the hotspot, that's going to work. Well, you got to have cell service. Hotspot doesn't work. The hotspot's really awesome on the highway, though. Tried it out. I think we need to leave the essential worker thing alone right now. When it comes up, I don't know if we need to have a board vote on it anyway. If there's a situation later in the year where we think that an individual would qualify, as long as we come up with some guidelines, that I could declare that person an essential worker and bring them back early. So How about we do that?
That'd be
And I'll,
great.
but I will let you know before I do it. Only during, no kids. No kids. We're not gonna do that. No kids. What's that? Modified. They have that one toilet that they use, that one sink that they use. Everybody stays away from them. They stay away from everybody. Hey, so Brent is having some battery issues. Brent, I mean, we can kind of cut the live stream while he fixes it and just keep rolling, right? So Brent, don't worry about disturbing us. Just do your thing.
Okay. So, first thing up is addendum to the COVID reopening plan. We talked about this last month, had a discussion topic on the hybrid plan, learning plan. I would like a motion to approve adding this as an option for St. James.
I'll second that motion.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I would like to actually have a little bit of discussion on it. Somebody that came to you guys last month and said I didn't know if this would be the best option for our community. I feel growing daily a little bit in the opposite direction. I think it would be an inconvenience to a lot of people, but you know, listening to him talk, I think there is a realistic factor that at some point this year we're either going to shut down or we're going to have to go hybrid. He is exactly right that Rolla is having some issues in the fact their kids just aren't staying home on their days off. But the reality of that is that's a personal decision you're making on your own or you're allowing your child to make, but we can keep the kids safe when they're here. So with saying that and the fact that even the days they're not here, we can send them home with their work preloaded. So then if they don't have internet, your Canvas will still load while you're at your house. As long as you have a charged battery, they can still learn. So just to end the fact that last month I kind of said, I don't know about this. This month I think it could be more and more important for us as we keep going.
And we still don't think it's a good thing, but it's better than no school.
Yeah.
So,
So just so I understand correctly, the 2 days they're at school, you can load Canvas to where they do not need internet access and they can do their work for the 2 days that they're.
Yes, so the model that we would have, in order to meet the state's criteria to count those days for attendance anyway, the model that all the schools I've contacted that they're doing, the time that they're here is directly teaching. We're not handing out worksheets. We're not doing you're working on stuff. I'm teaching you content while you're in the building. And then the work that goes with that, that's what they access the next day. So all of that can be uploaded to Canvas for our high school and middle school students, and then on Google Classroom at the elementary. And then if they do that work the next day when they come back, if they have it completed, we are allowed by the state to count that day as attendance points when they were gone. So that gets us what we need, and at the same time, then we can give the kid feedback on the work. So yeah.
That's good. That's good, Tim.
Okay. Any more discussion? Those in favor of adding the hybrid learning plan, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the continuing school improvement plan. Like a motion to approve the new CSIP. Got a motion?
I'll second.
Showing, I'm sorry, I can't hardly hear you. So I have a motion and a second. Discussion? I just want to commend the admin team for all the work that they continue to do in developing all these action plans. So I think you did a great job.
I'd like to quickly just announce the people that just list everybody off that helped through the entire CSIP. So we had teachers Tracy Barr, Katie Kraft, Stacy Waldman, and Hannah Heaton. And we have one that was a para and now is a teacher is Rachel Williams. We had 3 pairs. One was Rachel, and then Nadia Dava Forrester, John Capehart. And we had some students. John Perkins, he's a sharp little guy at the middle school. Mallory Hanson, and then we had, she was at the middle school, and then Caden Geezy and Sammy Chitwood at the high school. They were really awesome. They contributed and did a good job providing the student input and gave us great things to think about. Then we had some parents. We had Mark Perkins, Nathaniel Mitchell, Jennifer Spurgeon, Mike Spurgeon. I think Mike actually represented Jennifer. Sylvia Scobie, and Janet Creek. Used to be Janet Crafton. And then we had 2 kind of at-large people, Jim Fleming and Frank Brooks. And then we had Shannon Parsons, West DeLuca, Victoria, Kara Carrier, Lisa Hartley, Greg Harlan, Tim Metcalf, and then board members Carl Bear and Tina Spurgeon. And we had a patron known as John Rapp, who's now a board member, who participated as well, did a great job, and then the entire admin team. So all those people worked very hard, came up with this. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect plan. The great thing is we're going to revisit it every spring, and if there's things in it that you see that we don't like anymore, or we maybe achieved it, we're going to change it. We're going to update it. So it's a living document. Every spring, revisit it. Very excited about it. People they want to see it, so I'm looking forward to releasing it tomorrow.
Okay. Those in favor of approving the CSIP, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll carry that forward and review it a year from now. Next action is approval of discretionary emergency leave plan, as we discussed earlier. As recommended, it would be an approval to add an additional 10 days of emergency leave. Anyone like to make a motion to approve that? And if you'd like to do it as a 555?
Is this the 555 that we're approving, or is it just
However you want to make the motion, sir.
I will make the motion to approve 10 days additional leave.
I have a motion to approve 10 days of emergency leave for COVID-related activities. And I have a second. Discussion?
Does that not include 5 from personal, right? That's just 10 additional days.
I
She
said 10 additional days.
just said
Okay,
10 additional days.
I mean, right, okay. So nothing then from the personal leave.
Say that one.
that's the discussion.
Until after day 20, then. It would be after day 20, then.
Correct. Okay, so we had 10 to that and then 5.
It's the same thing except for the 5 personal leaves is not sandwiched in the middle, basically.
Okay. Further discussion? Those in favor say aye. Opposed? No one's opposed. Motion carries. All right, that is it for action topics. Dr. Johnson, we'll go back to you for your superintendent's report.
All right. Financial report, it's all over the place in between COVID and just our bond money. It's we joke around that we really have no data from last year to compare because our budget was so much more with 33 million. This year it's like 21 million, but anything that's if you see something, it doesn't look right, call me up, call Susan up, and we can answer the questions. When you take out all the CARES stuff and you take out all of the bond stuff, we're where we need to be. We know we have less money that's coming in from the state. However, the positive is the governor released nearly 100 million in additional CARES, and then 61.5 is going to K-12 education. Calculated about 122 more for us. Don't have that yet, but it's on the way. So that's the positive things there. And we continue to work. If you look on that grant summary, we continue to work on the grants, and we have one out there right now that's getting ready to be approved. The $106,000, that includes the thermal temperature scanners that you see as you walk into these doors, and we feel that that's going to be approved. That's definitely an expense that we would not need if it wasn't for COVID. So that's really what's going on with financial. If you have, like I said, any questions on that, don't hesitate to ask me. Parents as teachers, I believe Mr. Webster.
So parents as teachers. It's been very challenging this year to be able to make those contacts. One of the first things that she asked is, what do you want me to do, Tim? I asked her to reach out to the National Association and see what their guidelines were at this time. They recommended, obviously, that we not go into people's houses. So I've requested that she does not do that, that we just make virtual visits. If there are certain circumstances where we do need to meet with some kids, if we can make exceptions where we can be 6 foot apart and she feels completely comfortable, she had asked if she could do it, and if we take precautions. Obviously I told her if she felt comfortable, but at no point would it be expected of her this year. Within that, funding as well as down, it should pan out fairly easy in the fact of we're not servicing as many families right now because people don't want us in their house either. So it's kind of a wash right now. So there's not a lot going on with parents as teachers right now, but it's not from lack of effort. It's just current situation and reality of where we're at.
Any questions from PAT? Immunization reports. I can say that our nursing team has done a very good job putting this information together. For the first time ever, though, they have students that don't have the records. And this is going on all across the state right now. Patrick can attest to that. Talking to the state school nurse consultant, Marjorie Cole, this is a problem everywhere, and it's stemming with all the virtual students. And if anyone that they don't want to send their kids to school because they're worried about COVID, they're not going to want to take their child to the clinic to get the shot, right? So we have a large number, not a large, but unusual number in the spots that we normally don't have where they're not getting their shots. So we asked the state, what do we do? Well, right now, don't worry about it. If they're home, they're not endangering any other students. We'll get that later. When they want to come back, then you can chase it then. So that's unlike, we always want them to have their immunizations complete, but we're letting that go right now. So they did a really good job. This is a very accurate report. Antigen testing program. So we, as we've already mentioned, we've gone through the webinar, and we feel that this is something that could be beneficial to our school. So we have applied for it, and so we're hopeful that we get that. So we'll see how that works out. So hopefully that's coming. The culture and climate audit. We talked about putting out a survey to our staff to find out how people feel. Is there a good time to do a survey? There's never a good time to do a survey. Probably right now with COVID, with building projects, this is probably the worst time ever, right, to do a survey. But we're going to do it anyway. So we feel that we need to do this survey because this is part of the CSIB. This is the new CSIB has just been approved. We need to get feedback from people. So one of the issues with surveys is anonymity. People, they feel that when the school does it, that we know who's doing it. So what I did, I felt like it would be better to have a third-party neutral person to come in. Kevin Daniel understands what we just went through, and so he's going to be putting out a survey tomorrow morning. If I think that it's part of the plan. He's going to put that out tomorrow morning. He's going to go over the results with the admin team on November the 13th, and then he would like to meet with the board. Now he would connect virtually, and then you could connect virtually as well, but we could also come together. He would like to meet sometime for the board to go over all the data for us so that you could see things where we need to work on, and then we can you know, the board can make some decisions on how we move forward with that. So the week of November 16th through 20th, I believe he said on that Thursday, on the 19th, he's unavailable, but wanted to know if the board members could meet that week. So November 16th through 20. And I can let him know if you can tell me. Twice that week? Twice, is that our board meeting? What is our board meeting? What's the? He can't meet that night, no. And he says he needs about 75 minutes. I don't know why he says 75 minutes, but he says, I need about 75 minutes. So, not an hour, 75 minutes. So, I mean, do you not want to do, I mean, he gave us that week. We could say another week if you want to do it the next week. Okay. Well, I mean, if you could do a day, he probably would love to do a day. But people work, so I don't know if that his.
I'd personally rather have another day. 75 minutes on top of a board meeting would be tough.
That same week, though?
Yeah, same week's fine.
So would the 17th on a Tuesday be okay, or the 16th on a Monday be okay? Any 6 o'clock work? Okay, and if you can't make it, you know, that's fine, but hopefully the majority of you can. And we know there's a lot of demands right now with everybody, so, you know, obviously Justin, he's got things going on, and you guys might have things going on. If you can't make it, it's understandable, so. Okay.
So can we vote on whether John wins or Owen?
Whether what?
John wins or Owen? Monday works. Are we gonna have 2 meetings that week or just one? Well, that's what he wants to do.
You can do the meeting virtually. The Kevin Daniel meeting virtually. I mean, we can do any meetings virtually.
Oh, so we're not meeting here.
No, we can do that virtually via Teams.
That makes a difference.
Yeah, that's a huge difference.
Because,
That's what I was
okay,
thinking.
that's a game changer. I
Yeah.
didn't realize. I thought we had to meet and he zoomed in.
Yeah, well, he's zooming. Kevin Daniel's zooming in. He said that he would like the board to be together, so you'd have that ability to have a conversation. But if you zoomed in, he's like, well, we can make that work too. So.
What's the difference between?
If we're doing it as a Zoom, then
How about we just tell him we'll do on November 16th, 6 p.m. a Zoom conference or a Zoom meeting.
perfect.
We'll just tell him that. That's what we're doing. All right. And then we'll still have our board meeting that Thursday. Okay, moving on. So just know that there's going to be that survey's going out, and then simultaneously we're going to send out some student surveys. We're going to administer those student surveys and then patron surveys. So those are going out. We're planning on trying to get those out tomorrow as well.
Okay, I know it's third party, but because this was an issue last time, I just wanted to clarify, if that's okay. Last time we asked, how many years have you been in the district? What's your position? All this other stuff. Are there still gonna be those defining marks on the
I didn't
survey?
I didn't see those in that. Did you see those? That like get that detailed? I mean, they had like buildings. They did have buildings.
Okay. I just
And-
wanted to make sure after the discussion we had last
Right.
time.
Now,
that was-
I mean, if people don't want to participate because they think, I mean, they don't have, it's a totally voluntary survey. They don't have to participate. We'd like everybody, I'm going to encourage people to participate. Kevin Daniel's I'm going to send out a little blurb first thing tomorrow morning, about 7:30. Boom. Hey, be ready. Kevin Daniel's going to be sending out from Fired Up Consulting a staff survey. It's going to be for all staff, not just teachers. It's going to be for all staff. And those that don't get on computers, they'll be able to come to the office or something and do it. But he's gonna then come in and say, and make it very clear, this is anonymous, this is controlled from outside, we are controlling this, the school district doesn't have control of this. So people don't want to answer if they think that any administrators are doing it. They think that there's retaliation or whatever, you know, that's a natural feeling, so. And with all surveys, there will be something someone won't like about it, so. Okay, moving on, this is a big one. So asked our athletic or activities director, Greg Harlan, to come up with an updated spectator mask wearing COVID precautions for our winter sports. And so you can see here, we made some changes. We changed the tier structure a little bit to kind of match the way we do our tiers for closing school. And so the recommendation for winter sports is we're going to change it up a little bit because it's almost impossible to make the people wear the mask the whole time. And so the change for the winter sports is they have to have their mask on as they come in, as they move around. Once they get to their spot, they can take their mask off. Any thoughts on that?
Yes. You know I'm going to have thoughts on this one. I noticed in the fall sport thing it said that they wear masks too and during all inside events, and then we changed that, as you said, in the winter sports, which I kind of wonder why, since the number of cases are now higher than they were this summer when we had the licking shootout, and in the licking shootout, everybody was required to wear a mask. And now we're going to say when they come to the basketball games that they don't have to wear a mask. And I looked at the diagram, which I'm not sure I quite understood that, but my feeling is if we can't enforce wearing masks, like even in football in the bleachers or whatever, are we really going to honestly be able to enforce people sitting in this diagram? Two people am I correct in this diagram? Two people and then?
Well, I think he actually said that it could get up to 3 people in that spot.
I had 2 little X's.
Yeah, he did it in 2 X's.
I have a problem with people not wearing masks in the gym. We say that they can take them off when they go, or they can take them off while they're watching the game.
The problem, Barb, is that when we have the rule, people don't wear the masks, and so when we tell them to wear the masks, and we have asked people to leave, right? So people are leaving, and then we have a whole town coming that doesn't like, they do their own thing, and they're not gonna, you can't tell us what to do. So now we're kicking a whole town out. So all of Sullivan, you're out of here. So we wanted to be able to, Greg and I think the administrative team can attest that it's almost impossible to control 500 people wearing masks. It's almost impossible. That, guys, you guys have been doing it, right? What's your thoughts on telling people? Well, they can't come, no spectators, right? Because it's a constant job, and I'm with you, Barb. I want people wearing their masks. Wear your stinking masks. We want people wearing masks, but if we can't manage it, we really need to go to no spectators.
And I know I beat this thing to death, but I'm pretty big on this mask thing. I think that if we start from the very beginning and explain to people this is our policy, which is what they did in the licking shootout, and you guys know I was surprised we had the licking shootout, to be honest. But we explained to people that we're doing this for the kids, that if they want to watch their children, if they want their kids to participate, then they need to wear a mask. I know there's 500 people. I know it's hard. It's got to be terribly difficult to ask people to wear a mask. But had we been doing, I'm going to go with Patrick here, had we been doing this a long time ago, we might not be in the situation that we're in right now. But we have great from CARES equipment here. People don't want to wear masks, stay home. And they can watch the ball game at home. I know it's not the same, but I really feel like we're here to protect our kids and protect our community. We've done a great job with the school right now.
Yes, you guys are doing a great job with the school. I think the mask thing is, I'm with you. I think it's really important.
Thank you.
There's a lot of good data that says that mask mandates in general are good. However, I also think that you guys are superstars. That you have been going and talking to angry adults that don't want to wear them and getting them to wear them just to see them take them off again. I know exactly how frustrating that could possibly be. And but I also think that if you back down and you say, well, you just got to wear them till you get to the stand, then you can take it off, then they're just going to not wear it till they get to the stand, and they're just going to wear it even less. So this comes back to that overall idea that 80% compliance is super good. It's super good. And so, you know, when people have done events and they do mask things, they always want to put, wear a mask if you feel comfortable doing so. And I told them, and I tell everybody, they often don't listen to me, but I tell everybody, you do not need to tell somebody what they can do. Right? This is America. They know their freedoms. They know what they can and what they cannot do. And so you should just say, in my opinion, or when I'm telling these events, I say you should just say you need to wear a mask, right? And then you enforce it to the level that you can. Is everybody going to wear a mask the whole time? Or is some people going to slip through? Well, yes. Yes, you're not going to get 100%. You're just not. With kids, you've got a lot better chance, although they're a lot sneakier than adults. Adults are more blatant, right? They'll push you right to your face, sure. Where kids will try to sneak it around you. But that's my opinion on it. You can take that for what
So you bring up the people would wear the mask, but then they'll put it under their nose. They don't wear them properly. So when do you tell them? Where do we go to a 70-year-old man and say you have it under your nose, pull it up? So if we're doing 100% masks, we have to have. We're going to enforce. If we're going to do it, then we need to enforce it. If that's what we want, 100% masks.
Is that Merlin and Joe and Gray, they had a meeting with the Four Rivers Conference, all the superintendents, principals, and athletic directors, and they came up with guidelines that all schools were supposed to follow. We played Sullivan here last weekend. Their principal was showing me pictures of the last game they had at home. They don't take vouchers. They let as many people in as they want. They don't require masks. They don't require masks in their school, but they don't require masks definitely at games. I don't know, we've had pictures sent to us from fans at volleyball games saying, well, these people aren't wearing masks. Well then, in the picture is the superintendent of the school sitting there not wearing a mask in the stands. So we have to figure out, like you said, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it 100%, that's fine. But we have to be ready to just say, we're not going to play until everybody puts a mask on or they leave.
So my thought
I'm not ready to do that.
Is if we do it, we those who don't, individuals that are our fans, we write a letter to them if they're causing a ruckus, and we ban them from sports. I mean, it almost has to come. You can't come to our activities anymore, individual. If a community comes in and refuses, all of them refuse to wear the mask, and they fight and argue, and I think we can call the school up and say, you guys are not welcome here until we lift our mask requirement. So I mean, this is what we're getting to if we require 100% mask.
And Barb made a really nice point earlier about, hey, if you want to watch your kid play, and that's ultimately the people that are going to listen. So tier 3, can we get rid of high school student vouchers? So that would basically be essential personnel, your player vouchers, which would be your parents, and then your school concessions. That way the parents would have that available. And that would be a limited group, It would basically turn into what your licking shootout was, which my understanding was our licking shootout had a very good success of enforcing the mask. Yes, it was tedious, and I do appreciate what Coach Smith
So
and
you're
Wells
saying-
did.
You're saying not let high school kids come to games?
That's correct.
See, I think
No,
that's
just
wrong,
tier
too.
3, just tier 3. If we go to a tier 3 and say this is how we're going to control this, that would be where we're
I
at.
think if we get to the point where you can tell high school kids you can't come watch
Yeah,
interscholastic activities, then we're robbing those kids
No
of
argument.
something that they are,
No
that
argument.
we need to give to them. So I think that's wrong.
But we're also talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry in the NFL that is not allowing fans. Multi-billion,
We're not the
billions
NFL.
of,
We're a high
billions
school.
of dollars being lost to
We are a
protect
high
individuals.
school.
I
Can-
agree,
Not the NFL.
but we're trying to
We're a high
protect
school.
people. We're still
We
trying to
get
protect
where
people.
We're telling our kids, no, you can't come. Then why even play the
Okay.
sport?
As somebody who was at all the football games, I would like to say something, because I know you were at a couple, but our students did the best at keeping their mask on.
No
Their
argument.
student section had it on, so why are we punishing our students? I agree with the limited spectator vouchers outside. Our kids, I mean, that somebody walk over to them and be like, mask, every kid had a mask up. I mean, they do it at school. I think they're some of the most rule following we have.
Not arguing, but you're also taking a staff personnel away because there is constantly, our staff is monitoring our student section to make sure they're not doing something else besides not wearing a mask.
But they
mean,
stand on the
it's-
wall anyway and monitor the student section.
That's what I'm saying, but they're gonna have other things to do now that we're
We're
requiring
enforcing
masks. I'm not saying we go to a tier 3. Let's
Yeah.
make sure that's clear as well. I would love to see a tier 2, but I think if we're going to reduce something or allow these kids to play, because that's ultimately what I think is more important than high school students going to a game, is allowing the children to play that are on the team. I think we need to have that boundary there.
So do we just need to reduce spectators drastically?
But
All?
I still think that if, and I don't know if this would work, but if we make sure that our
That was our volleyball game though, right? Where the other team wasn't wearing masks, the other parents? That was at our school? Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, it makes it pretty hard to do.
Couple of them,
Yeah.
I was there, two or
The
three of them would
superintendent
do
doesn't
it.
wear one, so I don't know how,
Right.
you know, if the superintendent of of the school's not gonna wear one, doesn't matter who goes up and asks him. You know, it's not gonna matter.
The other thing that people gotta remember is, like, that night I was the only one there. I'm also chasing kids from running the hallways. I'm also getting the volleyballs in between sets. I'm doing the music. You can't, so to do this at a home game, we would all have to be on duty. We would need our SRO there, because some of the responses I got from Cuba that night, we would need our SRO there, because they weren't gonna comply. And I know Greg, is for the visiting teams, he does do
He puts all that out.
great
They know
job
that ahead of time, but they don't, parents, they don't, I don't think it's gonna make a hill of beans to them if we say you're not gonna get to watch your kid. They're gonna say, fine, I'll just take my kid. It's their God-given right, they don't have to wear one.
And I think on that thing Greg put out, he did reduce numbers, is what he did, and to a pretty manageable amount. I think, he cut it down to like 250
total?
196 total capacity.
Yeah, so, like, and he said if he needed to, you know, the numbers could be adjusted, but he would stay at 196.
I watched our Selden football game last week. I was talking to the Selden principal and athletic director, and a parent came up to him at halftime and said right in front of me with them, "Why are you wearing your mask now? I never see you wearing your mask before. You're trying to impress these guys because they said we had to wear them." So, I mean, that's what we get.
I know,
Okay.
I just think we have to make the decision as a school.
We can't compare ourselves to other districts, and I agree. It's gonna be extremely difficult. I'm sorry, Phil, please stop. The board is having a meeting. I don't want to kick you out, but I also want the board to have a meeting. Barb, I agree with you. I don't want to be compared to other districts, and I think it's gonna take, I agree, it's gonna take a lot of effort to enforce the mask. But if people want to come and watch their kids play, then they need to take some personal responsibility.
Okay, I see your point about just having player tickets. I mean, I don't know if adding an additional tier in there, I do think our students are more well-behaved than our other people, but I do see where you're going with that.
I think our students very much, I agree. And Barb, I cannot tell you how frustrated I was at the first football game I went to, and not everybody in the stands is wearing, when Joe and Phil and Greg are all standing there saying, "Please put your masks on, you're going into the bleachers." They are doing their best. But as soon as they get up there, and it are, you know, the people wearing red and black and white, pretty darn good about it. But the visiting team is 100% the problem. But if you limit the number of people, it allows for them to have not, because what I'm scared of is we're gonna have 6 administrators on duty for every basketball game. If we allow this many people. 196 may not look like a lot, that's a lot of people to police.
So my other point was gonna be, can we not designate the visiting team section? Like, they don't, all these little X's, they get this number of X's, because we only have 50 tickets for them, correct?
We did do that for the middle school tournament that's going on right now, and I think it's working. The people aren't very happy about it, but we are designating, yeah.
Because I would like to see that happen, especially if we have a situation like they're discussing happened at volleyball games and stuff, if they're all isolated.
Greg is talking about actually putting something up on that middle seat that they can't sit on, like a rope or something. So they sit on one seat, 2 or 3 people, family, whatever. Nothing, and then 2 or 3 people, nothing. I mean, it goes like that.
So what happens if people don't sit in their designated area or sit in the places? Because people could step right over a rope.
So what's going to end up happening, and I've been in a school where I enforce rules, and you kick people out. And if they argue with you, and if they cause a scene, then you, as the superintendent of schools, I send a letter, say you are no longer welcome at our school, to those individuals, whether it's the individuals from St. James, and there's some people from St. James that they will put that Dr. Pepper, because we say, hey, if you need to take a drink, you can take your mask off, right? So they'll put the Dr. Pepper right here and act like they're drinking the whole time. So what do you do then? What do you do then? Because now they're playing a game with you. I'm drinking. I'm eating popcorn. I have to do this every time I take one kernel of popcorn. So do we need to eliminate food? Do we need to eliminate sodas? I understand Phil's emotion, because he feels strongly about this, because he's the one enforcing it, and it's very hard to enforce this.
And to piggyback what he was saying, and either way is where I'm at with it, but I went to middle school game the other night. It took 2 basketball games for somebody to finish a bag of popcorn. I mean,
So then what do you do? Because those people are saying, well, they're not wearing their mask. So this is how it gets complicated, Barb. I mean, this is
I
very
understand.
complicated.
I do. I understand the complications, and I don't want to have confrontations with people. But I think if we, as a school system, say, if you want to come to St. James to watch a basketball game or a whatever, volleyball, whatever, our policy is you wear a mask in the building, period. Not you take it off when you get up in the bleachers.
So
You wear it in the building.
I think we need to get rid of concessions then. Can we get rid of concessions?
I don't know that you legally can because you have to provide water, don't you, at some point? With capacity being a commercial building.
I mean, if they take their mask off to eat, then they have their mask off.
I'm not, sorry, I'm good with getting rid of concessions, but I think we have to provide an availability to water, and we don't want them using water fountains. So we have to provide some type of availability to water, I think is our.
Do they have, then, I mean, just, I'm gonna go extreme here, do they have to walk outside to take a drink of water?
Need to
Because,
go in the commons.
Yeah, no, so we can say no water allowed in the or water allowed in the, no food or drink allowed in the stands.
and
The
so,
only way they're gonna be
so
able to
then we're
watch the
gonna
game
have,
is in the
so then
stands.
we're gonna have people policing the doorway. And they'll get it after a while, but every away crowd, you're gonna have to do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I totally understand what everybody's saying, but are we just doing this for the away teams? Because our general guidelines for these football games was that it was highly recommended to wear a mask in the stands, and most people were,
No,
was
it
it mandatory?
No,
Okay,
it
well,
says.
for the main stands,
And
okay.
I think that's why they wanted to change it for winter seasons, because it was impossible to enforce.
Yeah, okay.
You can go tell a crowd of 10, they all put their mask on, you walk and tell the other crowd of 10, they put their mask on, this first crowd of 10 take their mask off. And it's ongoing.
See, and the other thing I sit there and think about was just something, I mean, my son is most likely gonna be playing JV basketball. I might have another parent that's a friend that his son's playing varsity. Could we switch spots, like with vouchers? I mean, could that be a possibility of something like that? So that way you could, to see your child, I mean, I would love to stay for both games, but I think a parent thing's more important than a fan.
And that's
So
what I was
that's-
gonna say, these vouchers, there's not even close to enough here to even accommodate parents.
Mm-mm.
20.
Yeah, 20 to 24.
we got 4 for home games, and then we got some away games, we only got 2, some away games, we got 3. I mean, but if you have 22,
No, you're looking at about 2.
Mhm.
See, I would much rather give up the student seats and allow grandparents, but that's my opinion, take that for what it's worth. I don't know, and everybody remembers John Rapp as a student, I enjoyed the student section more than anybody, but just trying to look out for the community as a whole, not just what we're trying to do.
most kids don't.
I was,
So, to
and-
parent, how do you police
How
that?
do you police it out? Yep.
well, I was gonna recommend, what's typical in between games, Barb, what's the clock set for?
Usually 10 to 15 minutes.
And we push that to 30 to allow for traffic in and out and to allow for parents that.
first
only
group
have
to
a
leave.
baby kid.
Yeah.
Just my 2 cents for what it's worth. I like that a lot more because I'm a kid advocate. It is real tough when the reason we have sports is for school spirit. I just can't imagine telling kids not to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, as
I
much
want the
as-
kids to be there.
Yeah. This is no win, guys. We're doing the right thing by putting masks at the forefront as importance. It's gonna cause us problems because we're the only school. I know we don't worry about other schools, but we will be the only school that's doing this.
Manpower, what would you expect your staff to, what kind of staffing would you have to have?
At a big, well,
You're thinking an SRO and 3 to 4 admins?
Yep. I think,
Does our SRO contract allow for him to be at every?
not
event?
every game. We made arrangements for the specific games that we thought would be more intense games throughout the year.
you know, if you went by what Greg was proposing, numbers wise, I think, you know, 2 or 3 of us can manage that. But initially, I would like to see our SRO there, because depending on the school, the town, I do anticipate there will be some issues.
I think we can ask the SRO to be there
200
for every
people,
game.
that's pretty manageable.
Yeah. Could we go to the point that we explain to other schools and our spectators and students that we want parents, grandparents, students to come, but they have to wear a mask, and if we cannot enforce it, if people absolutely refuse, then we will end up on Tier 4, where we don't have any spectators, and I don't think anybody wants that. That's the whole point of high school
Well,
sports.
the problem is we'll judge it on the prior game, right? So the game before, we have problems with
Well,
Cuba, and then
I think we go
Not-
off like a 2 to 3.
yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
not just one game necessarily, but just watch the process and say, you know, and I'm thinking Pollyanna or whatever, I just keep thinking that at some point, people have to take responsibility. And we want to protect our players so they can be out there. Joe, I don't envy your position at all. I'm not saying that, or yours or Greg's or Phil's, but I think for the safety of our community and for our school district, my position would be that we require masks.
Okay, so Barb, I'm just gonna sneak
Sure,
in
that's
here,
okay.
because you're gonna base, if we go to Tier 4 on 3 games. the
No,
3
not
previous
necessarily.
games.
I'm just
Okay,
saying at
I
some
know, but,
point, yeah.
like, hypothetically, these 3 games, ultimately, we're punishing our kids for
Right.
what Owensville, Cuba, and Stillville did, just using those because they're
Sure.
close. And then we play St. Clair, and who knows, their fans would have been okay, but ultimately, our kids are the ones who lost their fans. We're not really
Could
doing
we say
anything for
just
those
St.
3.
James people? I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know what
I
the
mean,
answer is. Yeah.
I'm just saying, you know,
Sure.
just
And there's no easy answer on this.
as
Maybe
a
we
parent,
just,
that's hard to
Yes.
hear that my fate is determined by the 3 crowds from visiting
understand.
towns. I
Would moving games to the middle school allow
Yes.
for more?
was
we
gonna ask
allow
that.
for better spacing, for sure.
I think you better talk to your coaches about that.
I mean, we're talking about safety no matter what.
True,
I
but
mean,
you're
we're
still
putting
gonna need
safety
masks.
first, so- Right, no, I know, but.
Yeah.
More
you know, if we can-
spectators.
If we can say, hey, 200 players, or 200 people, but we feel better if we have 200 people at the middle school, it's easier policed and we allow for more spacing, I think that's what we have to decide.
But isn't your issue still, are they gonna wear the mask or not?
I think that's an issue no matter what, I agree.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
just trying to look out
Sure.
for overall safety.
Yeah, I'm just throwing stuff out. And Tina, I agree with you. As a parent, I don't wanna miss my kids because of what somebody else from another town did. I don't wanna miss them playing, but I don't know what the answer to this is.
We just spent 25 minutes talking about adults. So, I don't have a problem with telling an adult, you gotta go. Anytime. And I don't think our administrative team, we just know there's gonna be problems. So, get ready. It's not a good feeling to get kicked out. People, they want to retaliate, they get, the Facebook stuff starts. I mean, it's just gonna be a show. And we're gonna be, and that's okay. We're trying to do the right thing, but we will be the focus. So, I don't think there's any more to talk about, because we're worried about adults. Adults, if they don't want to, and we have people in St. James, they're going to get a letter, and it's going to say, you are no longer welcome at St. James Sporting Events. And depending on how bad it is, they might not be welcome on our premises, and that could happen. Within that letter, if there's no premise, if you're no longer on the premises, it does say if you show up, the law enforcement will be called too. So those are the types of language that comes with that letter. That's why I'm gonna make sure that this is what you want, because we're willing to enforce it, but it'll get serious. Okay,
So, just so I am clear, we are not going with Greg's plan. and that
Correct.
We will be requiring masks
mask 100%
at all times as a spectator.
at all times,
Coaches,
everybody. Only ones that don't is referees and
players.
players while playing and on the bench.
But we are going with the seating chart, correct?
For what?
For the gym.
Yeah, yeah.
And we are gonna rope off something so visitors are in one section.
So we want seating charts for like each, like if you're from Sullivan, you sit over here.
I just want 50 of these seats that we've given to the visiting team to be together, so they're sitting, is that, I mean, am I reaching here?
No, that was his intention.
Okay,
And
I
then,
just wanna assure that that happens.
and then everybody else can sit where they want?
St.
mean-
James people.
Because if you have a mask, do you need a seating chart? Still?
The 6 feet though is gonna keep us from getting quarantined.
Right.
Cause if I'm sitting there and they're 6 feet away, I don't have to go down when he gets a phone call.
There you go. Okay.
And I think the other thought is that'll make it easier for our administration because we kind of all agree that our community is being pretty good about it. This will allow for their policing of the other communities a little bit easier if they're in one section.
And so there's always those stragglers that say, I'm just here to watch basketball, I'm not for any team, where do they sit? I mean, really, there's gonna be that too. There's no matter, there's
Well, where
always
did they
gonna be
get their
something.
ticket from? Our
Yeah,
tickets
they're-
are red,
that's
the
gonna be
other
based
ticket's yellow.
off their voucher color.
Yeah.
Yeah, they should get a certain color voucher.
I think though too, we need to strategically lay our plan out for delivering the message. You know, if we want to promote it on Facebook the day of the meeting, we have signs up in the gym, we announce it before the game starts on the microphone. Like, let's try to hit people at all angles, just to make sure that they have received the message that we are adamant about keeping your mask on, and if not, there will be repercussions.
We'll do everything that we need to do. And I hope we can get our season in. We might not have any games. Yeah. There might not be any games.
I just want to, I've got notes to make sure I get them to Coach Harlan, so I want to make sure I have everything. So keeping the seating chart, separate ticket colors for the visiting and us, and then we're just masked 100% of the time. Everything else is good, correct?
Concessions?
Oh, what was the decision on concession?
What do you think? Either of you, both of you sitting there.
She's looking at you,
Patrick and Joe, both of you.
If we're gonna require masks, then I think it's pretty difficult to allow food in the gym and still make that call on whether they're deliberately pulling them down or whether they're eating.
So allow concessions, but no food or drink in the gym and no loitering at the doors to watch the game.
If my opinion, if we don't want it in the gym, let's not sell it.
Okay.
Can they bring food in? I mean, it's just nonstop.
It's a hard spot. You guys are making a hard, it's a complicated issue because it got politicized for silly reasons, right? Overall, the guidance from the CDC is if you're gonna be in a spot where you could come within 6 feet of a person, you should have a mask on. If your seating chart is such to where you're more than 6 feet from anyone that's not in your household, then the CDC would not necessarily recommend that you have to wear a mask in that spot. And that's where Greg's plan was coming from. You can say that you've got to wear a mask, and the enforcement on getting that at 100% is crazy difficult. It's crazy. And Merlin is 100% right. You will have people banned, and you will end up with police here. That will happen. You will have people come just because you said they got to wear a mask 100% of the time, or we're going to call the cops on you. They're going to come get arrested to make a point. That's going to happen. So he's right. You need to be prepared if that's the stance that you're going to take. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but there's all these other considerations that kind of come into it. And so You know, Walmart had a mask mandate. They do not enforce that. I mean, it's still there. It's Dollar General. It says on their front door, you've got to have a mask to come in here. And you go in there, and there are people in there that don't have masks. And it's because people got shot places. I mean, people went into stores and like got in fistfights with employees who tried to tell them they had to wear masks. These were serious issues that did arise. And so if the stance is, in my opinion, if the stance is you gotta wear a mask, then you do that, you tell people, you know, but there's a point where maybe you should just let the enforcement drop because you're gonna make a bigger problem than what it's worth. So it's one thing to say you gotta do this, right? It's another thing to die on a hill. So there's a spot where you can push some people and you can get it, and others you're not gonna be able to. No matter what you do, when you're playing this compliance game, you're pushing on them to do what they want, they're pushing back on you. The harder you push, there's gonna be some people that are gonna keep pushing harder until you gotta take it as far as it'll go. And you gotta be prepared for that if that's the stances, that we're gonna take it as far as it needs to go. Just be ready for it. You guys gotta make that decision. I think that's an important decision for you to come up with. I can see that it's a kind of a fine shade of gray in here. You know, and maybe it's a thing where it's easier to enforce with your own people, and you've got a section for away people, and you know, you tell them they gotta wear them, and maybe you don't enforce that as much as you do with the kids, or what have you. I don't know what that looks like for you guys. That's my opinion.
Question, so with our seating chart, we have these groups. Okay, say this group right here, someone is positive in here. You've got groups over here, groups over here, that are 6 feet apart. Would those groups be quarantined?
No, most likely not in a gym situation. So, you know, we talk about an hour in a closed space. In a gym, the size of a gymnasium, they usually have high ceilings. You're talking about, I mean, a much bigger space than what we're in right now. I wouldn't say any of us who have been in here for more than an hour, we wouldn't need to quarantine because if one of us was positive. This is a large space. So, aerobiology, that's kind of study of how aerosolized particles move, is very complex. It's very complicated, and you know, no. If you're farther than 6 feet apart in a situation like that, my recommendation would be to not quarantine.
Greg went in and measured, yeah.
Okay.
Spent a lot of time in there getting that drawn up. And he went every other row. You know, he did a lot of good background on that.
The only ones would be the people directly behind the benches.
And Patrick, I appreciate your comments a lot. I certainly don't want anybody to be harmed and I know those incidences have occurred in places. So I personally think we ought to wear masks, but on the other side, I guess we have to be realistic enough to know where people are going to push this to the point that somebody may be harmed. And that certainly is not my intention by any means. If you feel like if people sit in these positions, my only question is, can we force them to sit in these places again?
It's just like anything. You're not going to get 100% compliance.
Sure.
And thinking that you, I mean, without a very high resource cost.
Yeah.
That's you get to a spot. It's like all these things are a curve. So 80%, that you're putting quite a bit of effort into that, but you're not expending excessively. Right?
Okay.
So you want to get to that spot where you're approaching 100. You're putting more and more and more effort as you get closer to that.
So you feel like if we can do this and get 80% compliance, that people and the kids on the court would be relatively safe?
My recommendation for all of the events is to say, you gotta wear a mask, and then to have a plan. You ask somebody, you know, if you see them, they're busting bubbles. They're coming up at people, they don't have a mask on, they're being purposely belligerent, or they're inspiring other people to break rules. Those are the people that you target.
Okay.
And you guys, You guys know who those are. You see them in the schools too, the jokesters, they're just the challenging cases. You can pick them out of a crowd anywhere you go.
I really think if we go with the numbers that he proposed, I think that's manageable. I really do, because, you know, Greg was showing it to me, and he could adjust if he felt like, oh, all of a sudden we've got more kids than what we thought. You adjust those numbers, take some away from the student numbers, because right now I think he's planning on 50 students. There's a lot of nights we don't have 50. So he could adjust and give those, still having the same total number. I really do. I really think that would be more manageable for us, easier, and, you know, people are gonna stand out a little bit more, and they'll be more likely to comply, I think.
So the only thing I'm gonna suggest, because I think we're leaning a different way, is I think our student section has to wear masks at all times, because that is a guarantee they are not in the same household being grouped together.
Somebody said it earlier, so I
So,
think
yeah,
that'll be your best.
I don't think
group.
that'll be an issue, but that's the only thing that I could see us.
Oh, no, yeah,
Is there a student section?
Yes.
he was allowing.
Oh, you mean on this?
Yeah, I didn't know we were doing student section, according to this.
I mean, we've got 50 students.
But they'll be spread, there'll be 2 or 3 kids at a spot,
Well, that's what I'm
right?
saying, those 2 or 3 are not gonna come in the same household, so they all need to wear masks. They need
Yes,
to be forced.
yes.
But everybody else, it sounds like we're gonna ask and move on.
And also, that's in line with what you guys do during the school day.
During the school day.
Students should just wear masks. They shouldn't have any problems with that anyway.
And then we'll have, I mean, if there's ever discrepancy, we have camera footage, we can do the research on the contact tracing and get that, so.
Speaking of camera footage, do we have our streaming kinks lined out? Like, we're gonna stream every home game? Because I know we did not for fall sports.
He's got that scheduled,
Sorry.
he put in,
Okay.
what's that thing called? It's got a funny name, whatever that, a lot of the conference schools are using it, it's gonna be,
Oh, yeah.
it's gonna be put in, he's got it scheduled. Yeah.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, we are going in with what is recommended?
What's that?
The way I understand it and the way I was delivering the message, so tell me if I'm wrong, is we're changing they can take it off when they sit down, and we're telling them they have to wear it.
We are going to ask them to wear masks at all times, and we will leave it up to administration.
With the administrators, okay.
And
So we
we
put-
will limit numbers accordance with this seating chart.
Our
Are we going
students
to
will be
allow
together or what?
concessions?
And we hope and pray that people sit with people that they live in their house with.
Right.
Concession,
At the end of the day,
Well,
we
if we're
can't
gonna-
be the police.
concessions, we're selling concessions.
Well,
I started to say, if we're telling them they have to, but we're not going with billy clubs after them,
I think
then
that's
they
the
can
right thing to
eat
do.
popcorn and then,
I feel,
yes,
and that's gonna take money away from a lot of our
Yes.
student groups.
Right.
well,
And
we can only, we gotta still run a school, right? And we're worried about, I think it bothers me more than anything else, we're worried about adults, and we're taking things away from kids, and I think that's why Phil is upset. He was trying to defend kids,
Well,
so,
adults can cause the problems for our kids as well.
yes.
yes, being bad role models, yes,
So,
yes.
well, it's not just that. You pack the house full of non-compliant adults, they're gonna quarantine your kids.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
you're gonna get your parents punished like we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
and that will affect the kids.
and that will affect kids.
Thank you, Patrick, for your input, I appreciate it.
I'm really glad Patrick showed up tonight. You just had a feeling that we had a lot of things to talk about, didn't you? Okay, so you have it, you got it all, okay. All right. So moving on, parent-teacher conferences, we decided to go virtual, same dates. It's gonna be, Tuesday, October 27th, and Thursday, October 29th. The 27th is from 3:30 to 7, and 29th is from 1 to 7. And teachers will be here on site, working, making phone calls, doing their virtual visits. So they've worked really, really hard to prepare for this, and I think they're gonna do a good job considering the circumstances. And we have a building level report.
Building level report, kind of the part I wanted to highlight from my little section there is just the Leading the Tiger Way September winners. Kind of a new recognition program. As I'm sure many of you feel through sitting through this meeting, it's depressing. So, I mean, it's the reality of COVID right now. None of these decisions are easy. Just something to try and highlight for teachers, just something we're trying to do this year, and staff members. You can see the winners for the month of September. Those are nominated by their peers, so other staff members. Just hopefully, it's small, but hopefully something we can do just to let them know we do appreciate them during this time. And then academically, we're spending a lot of time working on gaps from the closure last year. And identifying those. A lot of our buildings are participating in what is called the LEAP exam, which is an exam that the state's putting out to help find those gaps. So hopefully when we get to state testing that we've found those, identified them, and tried to fix them. Buildings, reports, a lot of our principals aren't here tonight because of activities, so they're at those, but I would try my best to answer any of the questions if you had any.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. Moving on, the MSBA news really wasn't a whole lot of news other than the recap of the MSBA conference, which was all virtual. The highlight that I feel like from the conference was Dr. Robert Redfield speaking, and he had it was a good discussion. He brought up, and being able to talk to Missouri leaders was pretty neat. That we had the head guy at our disposal for a little bit of time, so that was really awesome. And then just thanking board members, and our St. James board members, but all board members across the state and everywhere, just leading school districts right now. You guys have got a lot on your plate, so thank you for the time and energy you put into supporting schools and students. These aren't fun nights. This is tough stuff, difficult decisions, and I think you guys made some great decisions tonight. So that's it for the MSBA, and that's it for my report.
Get a motion to adjourn to closed session.
Anybody have the?
Got a
anybody have the
motion and a
mission
second.
memorized?
Those in favor, raise your hand. All for
everybody has
four,
the
we'll
mission
go to
memorized?
closed session.
Where are we getting the closed session at from?
That's a good question.
Thank you.